Chapter 161 Struggle. Dawn, when the sky was just brightening up, the sky around Qingyun Hill was covered thick with dark clouds. Raindrops fell soon after. The rain from small droplets to big. Very quickly the world turned gray and misty. Pitter-patter sounds of raindrops everywhere enveloped the lofty mountains in a water mist, appearing hazy and mysterious. The sound of raindrops hitting the green bamboo leaves, as though for the past 10,000 years it had never changed. At Qingyun Hill, it has always appeared lonely. The tips of the tile house eaves, moss grew on it due to the years, water droplets from drips turned into a water curtain, strings and strings like pearls fell down, landing on the floor paved with bluestones, splattering pearl-like fragments water beads. Wind in the rain, bursts of rain swayed in waves, bringing faint moisture and mist of water, oscillating between the windowsill, as if sentimentally attached to something. Lu Shuiqi stood alone before the window, watching the misty rain scenery outside the window, undulating. At this cold and chilly moment, it was as if only the sound of rain falling onto the bamboo leaves reverberated in between heaven and earth, mountains and rivers. A slight breeze blew past, her black hair gently ruffled, the rain mists brushed past her face, like a wave of coldness seeping into the skin. She pursued her lips slightly, her hands supporting against the windowsill. The sound of rain sounded far yet near. Eventually all seemed to fall deep into her heart. Wondered if there were also ripples. Footsteps were heard outside the house. Someone gently knocked on the door. Lu Shuiqi silently looked back, quietly came out of her musing, walked over to open the door. Her senior sister Wen Min was standing there. Lu Shuiqi smiled faintly, said, "Senior sister." Wen Min looked at her slightly haggard face, frowned and went in. Lu Shuiqi closed the door behind her. The two of them sat down in the simple house. Wen Min first looked at the bed, saw that the bed was tidily made up, sighed and said, "You didn't sleep last night." Lu Shuiqi quietly said, "I can't sleep." Wen Min looked at Lu Shuiqi, felt a stab of pain in her heart. She had entered Small Bamboo Valley earlier than Lu Shuiqi and had always been on good relations with her. With Lu Shuiqi's aloof and proud character, other than their mentor, Shui Yu, only Wen Min was the closest to her. Recently Lu Shuiqi had troubles endlessly. Wen Min saw it all and was anxious, although she was worrying by herself, but there was nothing she could do and could only watch helplessly as the relations between Lu Shuiqi, teacher and Qingyun various elders turned more and more tensed. For a moment the house was in silence. Wen Min too did not know what to say. After a moment, Lu Shuiqi instead spoke, "Senior sister, this time because of me, I am really sorry." Wen Min was stunned, said, "What?" Lu Shuiqi said, "I heard a few days ago Big Bamboo Valley Tian teacher uncle and Suru teacher uncle personally brought Song Darren Song's senior brother to propose marriage, but teacher instead rejected and also got into a big argument with Tian teacher uncle." Wen Min gave a wry laugh. There was some bitterness in her laughter, slowly shaking her head. That is nothing. To say this is also not because of you. He and I are not fated and we all know, teacher has always abhorred Big Bamboo Valley. Lu Shuiqi silently shook her head, said, "No it's not. That day was the day that I upset teacher. When I made her angry, I also dragged you down with it. If not with Suru teacher uncle around, Tian teacher uncle was also willing to give such a big face and personally came to propose marriage, very likely your marriage proposal would be successful. But, senior sister, I am really sorry." Wen Min smiled, heaved a long sigh, said, "Enough said. Don't blame yourself over it. Aren't I doing well now and teacher is only mad for a period and not to say there wouldn't be a chance in the future." Pausing, she glanced at Lu Shuiqi, said, "Enough of my stuff. As for you, what is your plan exactly? You can't go on this deadlock with teacher indefinitely." Lu Shuiqi's face turned slightly pale, remained silent. Wen Min pondered for a long time, said, "Junior sister, I roughly know what is going on in your mind, but you can't go on like this. Zhang, that person he after all has already joined the evil sect, cast aside by the world's good faction, and to take a step back and say, this time you went to the southwest, the battlefield where the fierce battle between the evil sect and demonic beasts, the scene's over there you." Wen Min suddenly stopped and did not continue, because at that moment Lu Shuiqi's face seemed to instantly turn pale, even her bright, clear eyes also seemed to be etched with deep pain. The room was silent for a long time, the pitter sounds of the rain outside the window, wordlessly lonely. Finally, Wen Min whispered, "Most probably he is really not in the mortal world anymore. You being this persistent, you yourself will only suffer." Lu Shuiqi was pale, did not speak and slowly stood up, went to the windowsill and gazed out. That blanket of mist in the mountain, misty lingering, like in a dream, even rain spray and water droplets at this moment seemed to feel surreal in the coldness. "I know. This cold and beautiful woman, in this misty rain, gently said, he might be really gone. Sometimes I have also thought about it. Actually to him, this may be also a release. I also know, teacher's rebuke, is not wrong, it is me who is in the wrong. I should not be carried away by my wishful thinking, I should not. Her voice suddenly choked. Wen-min stood up, was about to go comfort her when she suddenly turned, a figure of white floated, like a lonely cloud. Her eyes seemed to have tears, sparkling and clear, with a trace of melancholy that was never there before, said, Senior sister, I know it all but I just cannot let it go. Even though I sever this affection 1,000 times, I still cannot sever it, unable to escape from it. After returning from the southwest, I have told myself countless times, he is dead and everything is over. But every night after I fell asleep, I dreamt about that horrible scene at the venomous Serpent Valley, dreamt that he by the demonic beasts. Lu Shuiqi suddenly stopped, looked agitated, till Wen-min felt worried but Lu Shuiqi soon calmed down, only her eyes, still looked grieved. Then, I woke up, in cold sweat, like in an ice house. She looked at Wen-min silently and then her expression gradually turned fragile, as if her body was also beginning to tremble, said, Senior sister, what happened to me, what exactly happened to me? She suddenly fell into Wen-min's arms. Wen-min hugged her shoulders, felt her weak body shivering. From her ears came the sound of her quiet voice. Senior sister, I can't take it anymore, I really cannot take it anymore. Wen-min was silent, tightly held Lu Shuiqi who had never been so fragile. This once aloof and proud girl, right now seemed to be the most broken-hearted and disconsolated person in the world. Silence once again descended. The rain sounded anxious outside the window. Quiet sobs still seemed to be heard in the wind. Outside the small house, at the edge of the bamboo forest, Shuiyu Master was standing still silently, holding a oil-clothed black-green umbrella, stared at that house in the storm. Then she slowly turned away and disappeared into the bamboo forest. Between heaven and earth, the sound of the wind and rain whistling, it was a desolate time. In Heyang City, it was also raining like that. Zhou Yixian, Xiao Huan and Wild Dog Taoist, the three of them walked out from another remote alley, converged into the dense crowd on the main street, tried to take a few steps and was pushed to the sides. For one, there was simply too many people and difficult to walk. 2, they should first take shelter from the rain and discuss their plans. And this time they were divided into 2 factions. Xiao Huan insisted to return to that mortuary to take a look again. Zhou Yixian adamantly refused. Wild Dog Taoist this time, unprecedentedly supported Zhou Yixian. Xiao Huan singularly was weak but she had a clever tongue, debated 1 against 2, including although Wild Dog Taoist had different views with her this time but he was as usual, unable to speak once Xiao Huan glared at him so most of the time only Zhou Yixian alone protested. Right now the 3 of them was standing at the roadside. Zhou Yixian quietly said, You silly girl, what do you want to go back to that dangerous place, to court death? Xiao Huan curled her lips, said, And to say you have lived to such an old age, Grandpa, do you know there is something called morality? Zhou Yixian angrily said, Morality? Moral fart. What moral do you speak of when you are dead? That guy who is like a ghost is so powerful, aren't we courting death if we go back? Wild Dog Taoist nodded in the side, said, That's right, it is really not appropriate to go back. Xiao Huan shot a stare over. Wild Dog Taoist's heart jumped and was unable to continue. Xiao Huan looked back at Zhou Yixian, said, Grandpa, if it was not for him last night, we would have been dead and won't be here arguing about morality or not. Is it wrong to go back and take a look? Zhou Yixian without changing his expression, said, It is indeed because we were saved by him, so we have to cherish our lives, otherwise, if we walk right into the trap and again landed into the tiger's mouth, then wouldn't it be letting down Ghost Li's good intention? Xiao Huan stifled, for a moment could not think of anything to refute Zhou Yixian. Zhou Yixian could not help but be conceited. He smiled and said, Nothing to say, right? Xiao Huan angrily said, You know it well that man is eerie and unfathomable, aren't you a bit concerned about your savior? Zhou Yixian calmly said, Do not worry, Ghostly that fellow has skills and magical weapon. To compare the ghostly energy, I'm afraid his is even more sinister than that coffin. Even if he wants to die it would also be difficult. What are you worried about? Pausing for a while, he said, And to say, didn't you give him a reading 10 years ago, and you said at that time, this person has a 1 in 1,000, chaos devil physiognomy, all those stormy situations with twists and turns but it is not a short-lived premature life, then what are you still worrying for? Why, have you read my fortune before? Out of a sudden, a voice was heard beside them. The three startled, turned around and saw Ghost Lee appearing beside them. In broad daylight, it was as if he had flashed out from the rain. By now, although the rain was quite heavy, but the number of refugees in the city was really a lot, and most of them were terrified of the imminent arrival of the demonic beasts and so were not bothered about the rain. In fact, these past few days, there were cases in Heyong City where the people who were too tightly wrought lost control. Fortunately, Qingyun sect disciples were maintaining order in the city and most of them arrived within a short time to deal with it. However, the people were in a state of panic and also caused this city to be immersed in a madness borderline atmosphere all day. Xiao Huan and the rest were all startled, and then Xiao Huan was overjoyed, could not help but softly cried, "It's you." Zhou Yixian and Wild Dog Taoist instead frowned together at the same time. Zhou Yixian snorted and actually said the same words, "It's you." Ghost Lee ignored them, first looked at Xiao Huan, saw the genuine obvious joy on her young face, his eyes could not help but revealed a trace of warmth, nodded slightly, said, "It is me." On Ghost Lee's shoulder, drenched because of the rain, the monkey Xiao Wei, also Gigi, called out to Xiao Huan, grinned, it seemed to be delighted too to see Xiao Huan. Xiao Huan smiled happily, spoke to Xiao Wei, "You still remembered me." He. Then, she looked up at Ghost Lee, hesitated for a moment, said, "Last night you all right?" Ghost Lee nodded and said, "I'm fine." Xiao Huan was then relieved, took a few more glances at Ghost Lee, suddenly for some reason, turned red, her eyes shifted to Xiao Wei, smiled and opened her arms, said, come over and let me hug." Xiao Wei Gigi giggled twice, suddenly leapt with both feet, left Ghost Lee's shoulder and jumped straight to Xiao Huan's arms. Xiao Huan laughed, felt the wet fur of the monkey and was about to take out a cloth to wipe it. Unexpectedly the monkey seemed to feel uncomfortable too and suddenly shook its body, immediately water beads sprayed everywhere. Xiao Huan cried out but was unwilling to let the monkey down and so quickly closed her eyes. Soon her face and clothes were wet because of the monkey. Xiao Huan opened her eyes, stared at Xiao Wei, the monkey's three eyes blinked, unmoving. Xiao Huan humphed, threw out her hands and threw Xiao Wei back to Ghost Lee. Xiao Wei climbed up back to Ghost Lee's shoulder, saw Xiao Huan hasten to arrange her clothing, could not help but Gigi laughed out loud. Xiao Huan did not know whether to laugh or cry, bit her lower lips and secretly glanced at Ghost Lee, then lowered her head and arranged her clothes. Ghost Lee turned to look at Zhou Yixian. Zhou Yixian felt somehow guilty, said, "Hey, stinky brat, I was your savior once, don't act recklessly." Ghost Lee pondered for a moment, looked around and saw the commoners around them were occupied with themselves. No one noticed them and so asked Zhou Yixian, "What are you exactly?" Zhou Yixian lifted his head up, said, "Old man me is a master." Xiao Huan and Wild Dog Taoist were stunned, evidently the answer made one felt very strange. But Ghost Lee was clearly ignoring this. "Master," calmly and directly asked, "last night your land escaped strange skill. It has been lost for a long time but legend said that this art was the ability of Qingyun sect founder ancestor Qingyun Zi who roamed the Jianghu. Why would you have it?" He looked at Zhou Yixian, said, "What is your relationship with Qingyun sect?" Zhou Yixian after a moment of silence, said, "All right. Things have come to such, I will no longer deceive you all." Xiao Huan and Wild Dog Taoist were shocked, saw Zhou Yixian's solemn face and did not look like he was kidding, could not help but turn serious too. Zhou Yixian was heard slowly speaking, "Things are actually like this. Old man me during my youth was a young and handsome, romantic and suave, talented and smart, peerless. Don't have to look at me this way, I will say it directly, all right. When I was young, I gathered herbs for a living. Once when I entered deep into the mountains to gather herbs, I accidentally fell into a thousands-jong tall cliff." Ghost Lee, Xiao Huan and Wild Dog Taoist all frowned at the same time but Zhou Yixian seemed to get more and more excited as he continued, "But old man me was lucky, a pine tree caught my clothes in midair, blocked most of the fall and then I fell down again. Unexpectedly there was a pool at the bottom and so old man me was fortunate that I did not die." Xiao Huan could not help but interrupted, "Grandfather, why is it that I seem to hear your story from somewhere and seems like many people also have also said it before, a lot of historical romance storytelling's heroes have all fell once like that from a cliff." Zhou Yixian glared at Xiao Huan angrily, "Is it me telling it or you? Shut up." Where was I? Oh, down the cliff but my life is lucky, I did not die and then I even accidentally discovered a secret manual left by a senior master unknown number of years before. Old man me has a natural aptitude and am intelligent, I comprehended the secret manual under the cliff, absorbing the spiritual energies of heaven and earth as food. Time traveled back and forth and finally old man me efforts finally came to a fruition, achieved Tao and become a celestial. Ghostly coldly said, other than your name, where else do you resemble a celestial? Zhou Yixian stifled a bit, looking a little embarrassed but immediately resumed his normal expression, sternly said, old man me for the world's common people, do good deeds and accumulate merits, that is why I roam the world. Ghostly indifferently said, then are you going to tell me, your land escape strange skill is learned from that manual? Zhou Yixian nodded again and again, seriously said, it is, you are worth teaching. But after speaking, he turned to face them, not only Ghostly but Xiaohuan and Wild Dog Taoist's faces clearly showed, do not believe, words. Ghostly looked at this person, he naturally would not believe that pack of lies but since Zhou Yixian fabricated such story, whatever it was, he was unwilling to reveal his identity. However, although this person had connections with Qing Yunhill but because he had once stayed with this person before and frankly there was nothing inappropriate, and besides to Ghostly, more or less he would always view them differently. As such, Ghostly did not press him further but also did not wish to speak more, was about to say a few words to them and then leave when suddenly at this moment, a burst of cries and screams were heard from the crowd somewhere south of the city, the sound was extremely mournful. Everyone was surprised and looked back, the people next to them on the streets also did the same, a stir went through the street full of people, the towering city walls were filled with people, right now all were running and scattering away. In the misty rain, a mournful scream sounded across the horizon, a huge ferocious bird opened its wings, a pair of big eyes glimmered with blood-red fierce light, pouncing down from the sky, both of its wings expanded out, it was actually almost as wide as half of the city gates, extremely terrible. Huge winds created by this giant bird, the strong winds attacked, the mast on the city walls snapped over by the winds. Everyone on the wall was terrified, ran away in all directions, the giant bird descended from the sky, a sharp scream, its huge sharp claws like a devil's hand, seized two people who were fleeing and then ascended and disappeared in the sky. The whole city instantly turned silent, after a long time, not sure who was the first to cry out, demonic beasts, the demonic beasts are here, we are finished. At that instant, the entire city dissolved into a hysteria, countless people howled, cries were heard everywhere, a scene of chaos. Only between heaven and earth that misty rain continued to fall quietly, as if nothing had happened. Chapter 162 Lonely. Deep, low roars were heard from all directions, on the plains 200 miles outside of Qing Yunhill, more and more strange demonic southern beasts gathered around, some of the beasts constantly howled to the sky. Among the groups of beasts, there were 6, 7 larger, far exceeding the surrounding common beasts, standing in the middle of the crowd, turning and growling, the surrounding beasts seemed to be especially fearful towards them. The foggy misty rain, more and more of the dark clouds in the sky gathered, gradually in the clouds at the horizon's edge, some bright lights flashed, after a moment, finally rumbling sound of thunder was heard. Dark and pressing onto the world's sky and earth, and unspeakable vicissitudes of life. Lightning flashed past the horizon, reflecting a strong and vigorous shadow, the giant demonic bird which had just returned from Heyong City, descended from the sky, relying on the light from the lightning, the beast saw the giant bird's claws clutching two people, for a moment, the hundreds demonic beasts near and far howled loudly, their roars forceful, making one's hair stands. Huge wings soared and flapped in the wind and rain, the giant bird circled once above the beast's crowd, suddenly loosed its claws, the two human silhouettes like a stone, fell down, although the human figures flipped in midair but their limbs did not flail around and looked extremely stiff, most likely along the way, those two poor humans could not take the giant bird's powerful grip and died under the two giant claws. The cries of the beasts on the ground immediately rose higher, sounds of teeth gnashing rose and fell, at least several beasts leapt up and pounced over instantly, in the dreary rain, blood indistinctly was seen and finally disappeared. The giant bird which was circling the sky shrieked twice, again flew for a while then as if it had discovered something, kept its wings, descended from the sky, landed deep among dense cluster of beasts. Its huge body was about to land when suddenly its huge wings spread out, making a hoot sound, the strong wind generated caused the surrounding several ferocious beasts to fall onto the ground, whining out. A gust of strong wind, the giant bird flapped past the herd just like that, along the way countless of beasts bent their heads reverently to avoid, in the middle it encountered those few large powerful beasts, each stared at each other, refusing to show any weakness. The giant bird drifted, its body soared up and down at times, from the top of the beasts or leaping on the tree's branches. At times when it encountered an inconceivable terrifying huge demonic beast, it passed directly underneath from the demonic beast. Wind and rain swayed, lightnings flashed across the sky horizon, the giant bird in the storm drifted like a duckweed, finally, again making a sharp shriek, landed from the sky. That was the densest area of the beast's herd, among waves of dark, pressing beasts, under the horizon of flashing lightnings. An oil-covered umbrella image suddenly flashed out, a few branches of peach blossom drawn on it, gently drifting in the storm. The giant bird landed beside this umbrella. By now it could be clearly seen, a wooden stick was tied onto the umbrella's handle, increasing its length and inserted into a rock, and under the umbrella right now was a young man dressed in gorgeous silks, sitting underneath, holding a wine flask and cup, pouring wine and drinking. And beside the young man, Teoti, who was obviously looking sleepy lying on the rock, saw the giant bird landed, only slightly opened his eyes, took a glance and again closed it. The surrounding beasts heard made restless roars. The giant bird landed on the ground, Gu called out, waved with its huge wings, immediately blew several beasts out from the area. Instantly cries of shock and anger were undulating, but none of the beasts dared to come forward to challenge. The giant bird swept an arrogant gaze around, obviously viewed those beasts in disdain and then turned around and faced the young man, but the next moment, it looked especially respectful. Gu. Facing the young man under the umbrella, the giant bird Gu cried out for a while. That young man seemed to understand bird language, slowly nodded. The giant bird again called out a few times and then stood where it was. After a moment it used its beak to clean up its body feathers. The falling rain had long drenched it. After cleaning up a few times, it quickly gave up its efforts, looked up to the night sky, slowly tucked its head into its wings, avoiding the wind and rain. The rain became heavier. That youth drank one cup one after another and never paused once, only occasionally in a trance, stared blankly in the distance for a moment and then silently looked down and again continued to drink. But no matter how much he drank, his face never revealed the slightest intoxication. Finally, that flask of wine was empty, fell gently from the hand in the wind and rain, landed on the ground full of mud. The young man slowly stood up. A stir went around the beasts' herd, revealing extreme fear in their eyes. Just that in the young man's eyes, those innumerable beasts were nothing, not at all concerned about them. In his eyes, at the moment only silently looking at the sky, the looming dark clouds, wind and rain whistling. Teoti gave a low cry, stood up at his side. The young man was silent, turned and gently patted Teoti's head, after a long time said, "Do you also feel lonely, Teoti?" The Teoti growled, but in the end no one knew what it meant. That young man lifted his head and looked at the sky, after a very long time, did not speak again. At Qingyunhill's summit, on Tongtian Peak, a night of heavy rain and it was still raining, those good faction members as the leader of the three major good faction sects was gathering at Crystal Hall for discussion. Arguments were heard from time to time. And above those, the three great masters, Qingyunhill Reverend Daozan, Tianyin Temple Puhong Master and Fenshang Valley Yun Yilin were also quietly in discussion. The three of them were frowning tightly, clearly preoccupied, deeply worried about the imminent demonic beast's catastrophe. Suddenly, sounds of urgent footsteps was heard outside the Crystal Hall. Everyone was startled. Qingyunhill, the oldest branch disciple Xiao Yikai, with quick steps walked into Crystal Hall, pausing slightly, nodded in greetings to the good faction members and then quickly went straight to Reverend Daozan, whispered in his ear. The crowd watched the two men, saw Xiao Yikai's solemn expression, unusual from the norm, and after he had spoken, Reverend Daoshuan's usual serious expression was even more without any smile, leaving only a solemn expression. Gradually, everyone started to tense up, vaguely felt an inexplicable pressure slowly descending upon this place. Reverend Daozan, after listening to Xiao Yikai, glanced at him, quietly asked in return. Xiao Yikai silently nodded, his expression definite. Reverend Daozan heaved a long sigh, nodded his head. Xiao Yikai then quietly turned and stood behind Reverend Daozan. Puhong Master and Yun Yilin by now could also tell. Puhong Master chanted and said, "Amitabha, Daozan sect head, could it be there is news of the beasts?" Reverend Daozan nodded his head, stood up. A stir of commotion went through the good faction members in the scene. Reverend Daozan focused his mind, a firm determined expression gradually shone on his face, loudly and clearly said, "Fellow good faction friends, we have just received a message. A large group of demonic beasts has already appeared in the wilderness 200 miles from Qingyunhill. Soon they will arrive in Heyong City at the foot of the mountain. Has also begun to discover sporadic traces of the demonic monsters. Once he had spoken, it immediately caused a commotion. For a moment, panic, fear, anger, sighs etc. various expressions appeared on the crowd's faces. The calamity suppressing on their hearts for the past days had finally arrived. Reverend Daozan watched the crowd's reactions, pressed down with both of his hands. The hubbub slowly died down, until it turned quiet. Reverend Daozan loudly said, "Everyone, now that the catastrophe is before us. The common people's lives are depending on us to battle this demonic beasts. Every one of you here are all cultivated masters embracing the true way, seeking livelihood for the common people. The approaching battle, you and I will spare no effort. What is known as the will of heaven unrestrained. Surely heaven never seals off all exits, although these evil monsters are running wild now, but most likely they will not last long." The crowd was silent for a while. Someone spoke. "Reverend is right. Reverend, please be assured, with so many highly skilled martial artists here, we will fight together with all of our might. Surely it will not be hard to win against those monsters." "It is, exactly." All of a sudden, as if being inspired, the crowd began to look relaxed and happy. After all, no matter what, other than the three major sects, there was still these experts. To look further, on this Qingyun Hill, there was still the legendary all-conquering, invincible Zhu Xian sword formation. Looking at Reverend Daoshuan's full of confident expression, what was there more to be worried about? Reverend Daozan, under the numerous good faction members' stares, slowly smiled, spoke a few words to the crowd and walked to the inner quarters with Puhong Master, Yun Yilan, Xiao Yikai and the rest. Once they had left the crowd's line of vision, Reverend Daoshuan's face immediately turned heavy and Puhong Master and Yun Yilan's expressions were the same. The group of them reached the secluded room. Xiao Yikai was the last and shut the door. Reverend Daozan turned and spoke to Xiao Yikai. Elaborate the details." Xiao Yikai nodded, said, "Yes. Disciple made an inspection to Heyang City at the foot of the mountain. Within a day received reports in succession, especially at the top of the city wall. Disciple personally saw a huge demon bird appeared. Looking at its appearance, it looked very similar to the Asura bird, among the rumored 13 evil beasts recently." Reverend Daozan met the glances of the other two masters, their expressions heavy. Xiao Yikai solemnly said, "In addition, the other fellow sect disciples who are secretly scouting in the surrounding all reported that they had discovered sporadic trails of the demonic beasts, especially most concentrated southwest 200 miles, but the few disciples who were scouting 200 miles beyond, disciple waited for a long time but did not receive news of them." Xiao Yikai spoke till here. His face gradually became downcast. Reverend Daoshuan's face was composed and Yun Yilan beside him sighed. Puhong Master quietly chanted. Reverend Daozan pondered for a moment, nodded his head. To Xiao Yikai said, "Seems like it will not be wrong. The demon beasts are really here. Yikai," he looked at his most beloved disciple, said, "Make one more trip downhill. Inform all of the disciples distributed in the areas to all come back. The range to be 100 miles around Qingyun Hill. Be sure to exhort them not to overstep the boundary when investigating and most definitely not to make a move against the demons on their own, in order to prevent any accidents." Xiao Yikai nodded his head, as if recalling something, said, "Teacher, then what about those commoners of Heyang City?" Reverend Daozan was silent for a moment and turned around and looked at Puhong Master and Yun Yilan. Puhong Master clasped his hands together and bent his head. Yun Yilan faintly said, "Now that things have come to such, everything will be led by Reverend Sect Head. Will like to ask Reverend Sect Head to make the decision." Reverend Daozan lifted his head slightly, an indication of his gratitude, and then pondered a moment, spoke to Xiao Yikai. "This is indeed tricky, but Heyang City is really too dangerous and we currently have no means to go down and protect the people. You immediately go downhill to Heyang City. Let all of our Qingyun Hill disciples in the city and tell the common people to hasten to the north. Minimally they have to travel past Qingyun mountain ranges. Those beast demons target right now is the good faction at Qingyun Hill and not those commoners. Maybe it could at least ensure their safety." Xiao Yikai was nonplussed for a moment, but looking at Reverend Daoshuan's expressionless face, in the end he still silently nodded and quietly said, "Yes, then disciple will go now." Reverend Daozan said, "There is one more thing. Quickly notify the other 6 branches leaders to come to Tongtian Peak immediately. I want to see them now. There is something that needs to be discussed." Xiao Yikai nodded and said, "Yes, disciple will go now." Reverend Daozan sighed and said, "Be careful on your journey, go." Xiao Yikai nodded his head and retreated. XXX. Illusory Moon Cave. Zhou Yixian surprised, frowning, a rare serious look appeared on his face. After hesitating for a moment, said, "Why are you asking that?" Ghost Li indifferently said, "Aren't you always knowledgeable and have wide experience? I am suddenly interested in this cave, so asking you about it. How much do you know about this cave?" Zhou Yixian glanced at Ghost Li. He looked calm and collected. There was no telling what he was thinking, a look of mystery. At that moment, they were still in Heyang City, but the city's mood right now was totally different from last night, where the giant bird had appeared. The people's fears had finally become a fact. The anxious folks under the overwhelming pressure of fear. More and more people were already at the brink of collapsing. From time to time some folks were seen shouting gibberish on the street, their behaviors like madmen. Zhou Yixian turned his eyes away. Thoughts went through his mind. Slowly said, You are not planning to do anything strange, right? Xiao Huan and Wild Dog Taoist were all looking at Ghost Li too. Xiao Wei on Ghost Li's shoulder seemed to sense something too, grinned at them and made a monkey face. Ghost Li indifferently said, "What do you think I can do?" Zhou Yixian made a dry laugh, said, "Actually I don't know much about the illusory moon cave. This cave is also not very well known, just that because 1,000 years ago that Qingyi founder achieved enlightenment after in seclusion inside there. At the same time Zhu Xian ancient sword appeared from there. The cave was then made famous, however these past years it has only been a place to keep the Zhu Xian ancient sword and only Qing Yun sect head can enter it, therefore its reputation also gradually died down." Ghost Li said, "Oh, is there more?" Zhou Yixian hesitated a moment, said, "I don't care what you want to do, but that place, you'd better not go in." Ghost Li's eyebrows raised, said, "Why?" Zhou Yixian sighed and said, "It's not like you are not aware of your identity now. That illusory moon cave is an important place in Qingyun. What if you are discovered on Qingyun Hill? You better not forget, right now on Qingyun Hill, there is not just 10,000s of good faction people. What if your identity is exposed? I'm afraid even if you turned into a bird, it will also be hard for you to escape." Ghost Li coldly said, "That is my business. You only need to tell me about the illusory moon cave will do." Zhou Yixian shook his head, murmured, "Nowadays these young people really do not have the patience. All right, that cave is named Illusory Moon. Rumors said that on the night of the full moon. In front of the cave there is a strange stone, colorful and magnificent, like illusion, like in a dream, but more importantly, actually there is a natural area inside the cave, which will cause the person who walked past it, to fall into an illusion. If one's will is not firm and determined, he will sink deep within it, unable to extricate oneself. His entire life of cultivation will be destroyed in a single day." Ghost Li was stunned for a moment, said, "What, there is such a thing?" Zhou Yixian snorted, looked at Ghost Li from head to toe, said, "I advise you not to have wishful thinking. Entering that illusory moon cave, there is only a death path." Ghost Li sneered, said, "How can you be sure?" Zhou Yixian said, "I know you are unconvinced and also know that your character is tough, but I will tell you the truth." His expression slowly turned solemn, an unexpected demeanor of sternness but not anger. In a deep voice said, "The so-called determined will is not about your character. In my opinion, your whole life is winds rising and clouds scudding." Translator's note. Turbulent, the twists and turns are like mountains. The griefs in your heart are numerous. If you fall into the illusion, I'm afraid inevitably it will trigger the matters in your heart and you will not be able to free yourself. He paused for a moment, as if somehow hesitant, but after thinking for a moment, in the end still said, "And, the magical weapon on you is an extremely ominous and evil object. Your body's blood and soul have long already merged with the sinister orb's evil power. This degree of evil object in that kind of illusion, will even be more detrimental and no help to you, so I will advise you one sentence, better give up this thought." Ghost Li looked at Zhou Yixian, like he was seeing this person for the first time, quietly watching. Zhou Yixian instead also looked straight back. After a long time, Ghost Li without speaking, slowly turned away. At that moment, there was another commotion in Heyang City. A large number of Qingyun disciples appeared on the streets, speaking loudly to the commoners. Zhou Yixian and the rest were stunned, squeezed in to hear. The Qingyun disciples were announcing to the crowd, the demon beasts would soon be here. Heyang City was no longer safe and asked the people to head north, at least over the mountain ranges. Zhou Yixian looked troubled after listening, shaking his head and sighed incessantly, turned to Xiao Huan and the rest. This is bad, don't know. Where is Ghost Li, that fellow?" Xiao Huan and Wild Dog Taoist were surprised and quickly turned but only saw the empty space behind them. The crowd was extremely packed. How would they be able to find Ghost Li's figure? The sea of people, a hubbub of noise. Zhou Yixian standing among the crowd, frowned and shook his head. Xiao Huan beside him was silent, only gazed far ahead. After a long time, gently sighed. In that sound, there seemed to be some sadness. Chapter 163 Concealed Person. The rain ceased temporarily, but the dark clouds still loomed low in the horizon, layers upon layers, giving one a feeling of suffocation. Heyong City's north gate was opened wide, countless of commoners streaming out from the city, headed towards the north. Incessant sound of crying was heard. Nobody could foresee in this journey, where exactly is the road ahead. Xiao Yikai led the Qingyun disciples and maintained order along the way, kept reassuring the panic-stricken commoners, again and again told the commoners around them, that this was only temporarily. In a few days, once after they defeated the demon beasts, after the calamity, everyone could once again go back to their homes. Constantly hard at work throughout the day, it was really exhausting and dehydrating. Looking at the snaking queues moving slowly ahead, Xiao Yikai silently shook his head, was about to take a moment of break when he saw Longsho Valley Lin Jingyu standing not away, also looking fatigued. He was on rather good terms with Lin Jingyu and so walked over, gently patted Lin Jingyu's shoulder. Lin Jingyu looked back, revealed a trace of a smile, opened his mouth to speak, but unexpectedly his voice was hoarse. "Senior brother, you are here too." Xiao Yikai acknowledged, both eyes met and then looked at the surrounding commoners, both shook their heads and smiled bitterly. Looking towards the ancient path heading towards the north, looking at it from afar, the sky looked gloomy too, not a single trace of light. Zhou Yixian, Xiao Huan and Wild Dog Taoist were among the crowd. Wild Dog Taoist, because of the large number of Qingyun disciples and also of his weird facial appearance, covered most of his face with a cloth hat, followed behind Zhou Yixian and Xiao Huan. Zhou Yixian walked in the crowd, glancing right and left, frowning tightly, from time to time sighed. Xiao Huan whispered, "Grandpa, what is it?" Zhou Yixian shook his head and said, "This war concerns the fate of the people, but I'm afraid the probability of the good faction at Qingyun Hill winning this war is not high." Xiao Huan was silent, knew more or less the reason for Zhou Yixian's words. Ever since the demon beasts appeared in the mortal world, in just a short time, from the southern border to the central plains, sweeping away all obstacles, invincible in the strength of a tyranny, brutal and cruel, the damages resulted already surpassed the past disasters and natural calamities. And now, the world's last resistance were mostly gathered at Qingyun Hill, and most of the people's hope, most likely were on that legendary Qingyun sect all-conquering Zhu Xian sword formation. Xiao Huan forced a smile and said, "Isn't there still a Zhu Xian sword formation? There is still hope." Zhou Yixian shrugged his shoulders, said, "Forget it, anyway small commoners like us, we will just resign to fate." Speaking till here, he paused for a moment and suddenly turned to look at the towering lofty, concealed within the dark clouds, the strange Qingyun Hill peaks jutting out and looking somehow grim, then slowly said, "But these righteous good faction people. Better not start a fire in the backyard." Xiao Huan was startled a bit, said, "What fire in the backyard?" Zhou Yixian gave a queer laugh, shook his head and did not answer, walked ahead. Xiao Huan glared at him, did not bother to ask further. After all, with the current situation, who would be in the mood to worry for the good faction? Just that Wild Dog Taoist following behind them, trembled for a moment, the pair of eyes hiding within the shadows under the cloth hat, glimmered unceasingly. The long snaking queue of commoners walked for a day. Lin Jingyu and the other disciples, after working hard for the whole day too, watched as most of the people had already left. Lin Jingyu then heaved a sigh of relief, truly felt that doing such things, compared to facing 3 or 5 ferocious beast demons, were even more tiring. While he was about to take a good rest, a child suddenly walked past, kept staring at Lin Jingyu. Lin Jingyu felt strange, looked at the child and saw his tattered clothes, evidently not a child from a rich household, but his features were elegant, his eyes bright, extremely adorable. Lin Jingyu smiled, softly said, "Little boy, is anything the matter?" The child hesitated for a moment, handed a note over, timidly said, "Just now an uncle told me to pass this note to you." Lin Jingyu was surprised, took the note from the child, opened it and saw 4 words written neatly on the top. "Fire in one's backyard." Lin Jingyu frowned, pondered for a moment, spoke to the child, "What does this mean? Oh right, where is the person who has given you the note?" The child turned around and pointed ahead, suddenly a confused look on his face, said, "Gone, just now that uncle who is wearing a hat, asked me to give you this." Lin Jingyu looked at the note in his hands, frowning tightly, looked up after a moment, only saw the sea of people. How could he find the mysterious person wearing a hat that the child talked about? Qingyun Hill, small bamboo peak. Chang Lang, like a dragon singing, brilliant light filled the house, Tianya's celestial sword horizontally held in the hand. Lu Shuiqi's face was expressionless, looking at the sword. On the autumn waters like sword blade, reflecting her unparalleled face, her skin like snow. She stared deeply at the sharp blade. Tianya seemed to sense something too, trembled slightly, as if excited. What are you thinking? Wenmin's voice was heard from the side. Lu Shuiqi, silently watching the sword in her hand, after a long time said, in a few days' time, on this sword blade, whose blood will flow on it? Wenmin walked slowly to her side, patted Lu Shuiqi's shoulder, softly said, all right, my good junior sister, the imminent catastrophe is before us, teacher too will not pursue the incident of your disobedience. As long as we do our best in this war, presumably heaven will not seal off all roads. Lu Shuiqi nodded, but for some reason, an unshakable gloom lingered in her heart, quietly said, yes. Wenmin smiled and said, that's good, teacher is still waiting for us to go to Tongtian Peak. Let's go. Lu Shuiqi nodded again, put away Tianya, took a deep breath and then followed behind Wenmin, walked out. Traveling down the winding corridor, they arrived before the small bamboo peak. Shuiyu Master was already standing there. A few junior small bamboo peak female disciples were standing beside her. Wenmin and Lu Shuiqi walked forward. Wenmin spoke first, teacher, junior sister Shuiqi and I have arrived. Shuiyu Master clasped her hands behind, slowly turned around. After glancing at Wenmin, she looked at Lu Shuiqi. Lu Shuiqi lowered her head and did not dare to look at her teacher, only softly spoke, teacher, I am here. Disciple is unfilial, made you angry. Shuiyu Master indifferently said, I don't have the time to be angry. Lu Shuiqi's face turned pale slightly, the others beside them did not dare to speak. Wenmin shook her head slightly, looked at Shuiyu Master, called out pleadingly, teacher. Shuiyu Master humphed, then suddenly sighed, said, forget it, leave all these aside temporarily. This war, if we are able to stay alive, we will speak then. All of the disciples did not dare to acknowledge. Shuiyu Master flung her sleeve, turned and spoke indifferently, let's go, Reverend Sect Head is still waiting for us at Tongtian Peak. Once she had finished her words, a white light encompassing her figure shot up to the sky. Wenmin looked at Lu Shuiqi. Lu Shuiqi forced a smile. Wenmin whispered, it's all right, don't think too much. After speaking, she turned and spoke to the group, let's go too. For a moment, bright lights dazzled the sky above Small Bamboo Valley. Streams of beautiful wondrous lights flew up, towards the heavy dark clouds, adding some colors, just that in the sky full of the dark clouds, in a blink swallowed those colorful lights. Qingyun Hill, Big Bamboo Valley. Song Darin brought 5 junior brothers and stood outside the observed silence hall, awaiting Tian Buyi and Suru's appearance. Just that time seemed to have passed for a long time. Tian Buyi, husband and wife, still did not appear. Sixth disciple, Dubishu, was feeling impatience, whispered to Song Darin, big senior brother, why hasn't teacher and teacher's wife appear, what are they doing inside? Song Darin glared at Dubishu, snapped at him, how would I know, if you want to know it that badly why don't you go in and take a look? Dubishu met with a rebuff, stammered and shrank back, grumbling, all right I know, you couldn't get your wife, don't have to vent it on me. Song Darin had sharp ears and actually heard it, could not help but flared up, stretched his hand and slapped the back of Dubishu's head, angrily said, what did you say? Dubishu was shocked. He had always been timid, other than in awe of his teacher and his wife. It would be this senior brother, but Song Darin usually was very accommodating. However, when his marriage proposal with Wenmin met with so many obstacles, it was a huge blow to him and he actually lost his temper. Several junior brothers standing beside were fighting back laughter, glanced sideways at Dubishu. Dubishu looked embarrassed, was about to seek help from the other senior brothers. Unexpectedly, when he looked towards them, Hidaji, Wuduya etc. each was either looking at the sky or looking out far at the mountains, a look of reverie, remarkably alike a celestial that did not want to be concerned with mortal affairs. Dubishu glared hatefully at those traitorous senior brothers, finally could only laugh dryly to Song Darin, said, big senior brother, you don't have to rush. After this calamity, junior brother me will immediately go downhill and invite the best matchmaker to help you with your proposal. Before he could finish, Song Darin, who had turned purple, with one foot kicked over, Hutong kicked Dubishu out far. Hidaji and the rest beside laughed secretly, each shaking their heads. Only Dubishu looked depressed, sat on the ground. The faint laughter sounds outside the hall were heard. Tian Buyi and Suru heard it. A rare trace of smile appeared on Suru's solemn face and then sighed, softly said, Buyi, the disciples are all waiting. Tian Buyi, dressed in long robe, his face stern, stood before the observed silence hall San Qing deity statues, silently nodded his head. Then he stared at the 3 statues and took one step forward, picked up 3 incense sticks from the altar, lighted them up from the candles, solemnly held the incenses and bowed 3 times to pay his obeisance. After inserting the incense sticks into the incense burner, Tian Buyi stood silently. Suru also bowed 3 times, her expression respectful. When they were ready to turn around, Tian Buyi suddenly thought of something, stopped in his steps. Suru was startled, looked back and said, "What is it, Buyi?" Tian Buyi frowned and then suddenly turned and strided. He headed instead to the back of the San Qing deity's statues. Suru's face changed. She seemed to comprehend something, but looking at her expression, she seemed to be a little hesitant, but in the end still followed Tian Buyi over. Behind the statues, there was also another altar table, but it was much smaller. Beside it there was a yellow cloth curtain hanging down, concealing half of it. Tian Buyi stood before this small altar. After looking at it for a while, he did not make any move to pray. After a long time, he stretched his hand into the cloth curtain, searched slightly, and from the side of the altar, took out a spiritual wooden tablet, on it properly engraved, "Senior Brother Wan Jianyi Spirit Tablet." Suru watched from the side, watched Tian Buyi used his sleeve to gently wipe off the dust from the tablet. The dust was not thick, evidently someone had cleaned it frequently. After wiping it cleanly, Tian Buyi respectfully placed the tablet on the altar, took out 3 incense and lighted it, again bowed 3 times to the tablet. Suru's face was indifferent, quietly said, "Buyi, why are you doing this? Don't tell me at this juncture, you are still hoping Wan's senior brother will protect Qingyun." Tian Buyi coldly said, "Wan's senior brother after all was from Qingyun." He had an air full of arrogance, but he placed our sect as high importance. If he was to know about today's event, his spirit in heaven will surely bless Qingyun. Suru was silent, after a long time gently shook her head, sighed. Tian Buyi again looked at the tablet for a long time, then slowly said, "Let's go." When both of them walked out from observed silence hall, Song Darren and the other disciples had long been waiting outside the door. Tian Buyi glanced from Song Darren to Du Bishu, nodded his head. He did not know what had happened in between. From the corner of his eyes saw the quiet disciples' dormitory in the distance. In his eyes there was a trace of helplessness. Perhaps it was the imminent catastrophe, the big battle that was about to begin. Tian Buyi looked to be in a very bad mood, did not speak much, looked at the disciples who had been waiting for a long time, in the end only just nodded his head, said, "Let's go." To Tong Tian Peak. Different lights flashed, Tian Buyi leading, with Suru following closely behind him. The Big Bamboo Valley disciples hurried to follow, the horizon with the dark clouds looming. Several brilliant lights flashed past again and then disappeared into the clouds. Xiao Yikai, Lin Jingyu and the rest of the Qingyun disciples were extremely exhausted, and finally on this day where the horizon turned dark, the ancient path where it sent all of Heyong City residents to the north, at the same time from outside Heyong City, there was still sporadic commoners streaming in, heading towards the north. Only in a day's effort, Xiao Yikai, Lin Jingyu and the rest of the Qingyun disciples looked like they had lost weight, extremely fatigued, and when each one of them spoke, their voices were all hoarse. Standing at the city wall, gazing far at the gradually disappearing line of commoners, Xiao Yikai only then felt relieved, bitterly laughed, spoke hoarsely to Lin Jingyu, finally sent them off. Lin Jingyu also heaved a long sigh, his tense expression also temporarily relaxed, but his brows were still frowning, not like Xiao Yikai who was totally relaxed. He seemed to be still worrying about something. Xiao Yikai was a clever man and soon noticed Lin Jingyu was still looking worried. With a slight surprise asked, "Why, Lin Junior brother, do you still feel that there is still something wrong?" Lin Jingyu was startled, shook his head and said, "Senior brother, you have misunderstood. Junior brother does not feel that something is wrong, just that facing the imminent calamity, feel uneasy." Xiao Yikai nodded his head, patted his shoulder, said, "I understand, actually I am too. But as evil will not win the good, heaven will not seal all doors, you and me are from the good faction, for the sake of the common people, the imminent battle, we will just do our best, don't have to think so much." Lin Jingyu smiled and nodded, said, "Senior brother is right." Xiao Yikai smiled and said, "Then I will go over there and take a look." He left Lin Jingyu and walked to the side. Initially he intended to take another look in Heyong City, to ensure they did not leave out any commoners. If not, once the beast demons arrive, most likely they will not be spared. Unexpectedly, he had just taken a few steps when suddenly he heard Lin Jingyu's quiet mumbling, "Back, fire, back." Xiao Yikai was surprised, turned around and saw Lin Jingyu frowning tightly, his expression looking perplexed, stood at where he was and mumbling to himself, listening carefully. The words sounded vague, some words came after the word after. Xiao Yikai's eyebrows jumped, said, Lin Jr. brother, what is it about the back of the mountain? Lin Jingyu was shocked, looked up, back of the mountain, what back of the mountain? Xiao Yikai was instead stunned by his words, said, I heard you kept saying something back of the mountain, I guess these few years you have been frequently visiting Tongtian Peak Founder's ancestral hall to offer sacrifices and helping to sweep the grounds. I thought something happened at the back of the mountain. Lin Jingyu, looking somehow embarrassed, quickly said, No, I was just absent-mindedly talking to myself. I made senior brother worried. Xiao Yikai smiled and said, It's all right if things are well, Lin Jr. brother, the big battle is approaching soon, you best rest and keep yourself in good condition. Lin Jingyu smiled and nodded, was about to speak when suddenly from far, a cry was heard from a Qingyun disciple. Xiao Yikai and Lin Jingyu were shocked, almost at the same time leapt up into the air, headed towards where the cry was heard. The cry was heard from Heyang City Southern Gate. A few Qingyun disciples was doing their last round of inspection, but right now each of them, like facing a great foe, wielding their weapons, their expressions tensed. On the city wall, a ferocious strange beast with lion head and wolf body, its huge eyes bright and piercing, making a low roar, it was staring at those Qingyun disciples, but it seemed to know those people was not commoners and so for a moment did not make any rash moves. Xiao Yikai and Lin Jingyu landed down. By then the other disciples have also rushed over. After everyone took a good look, all took a deep breath of cold air. Xiao Yikai heaved a long sigh, whispered, It's the demon beast. Suddenly, a Qingyun disciple beside Lin Jingyu shouted out, said, Outside, outside. The cries of fear, everyone heard it and immediately tensed up, almost at the same time looked towards where the Qingyun disciple pointed, somewhere outside Heyang City. Under that looming dark clouds, in the horizon, rumbling sounds of thunder were heard, the silent flashes of lightning pierced the firmament. The earth trembled slightly, the low, deep thunder like slowly seeping out from the recesses of the 9 netherworlds, entered directly deep into the human soul, reverberating unceasingly. Numerous demon beasts converged into an endless black terrible tide, surged forward from the distance, like a rumbling thunder, but the sound had already surpassed the thunder sound in the horizon, the harsh heaven and earth, lightning like snakes swarming around. The compelling murderous air, although was separated over a far distance, it had already assaulted them in the face. All of the Qingyun disciples were looking pale. Xiao Yikai clenched his teeth, loudly said, Go, quickly go, return to Qingyun Hill immediately. By his forceful shout, the group of Qingyun disciples did not dare to drag, each wielded their celestial sword and flew up to the sky. That lion-head wolf-body monster on the wall roared loudly, his appearance vicious. Lin Jingyu was the last in the group, looking back from the air, saw the infinite surge of demon beasts. The earth looked like it was a sea of ferocious beasts, not a single sign of human. This catastrophe had finally arrived at the most critical time. After hearing Xiao Yikai and the rest urgent reports, the packed crystal hall of good faction members at Qingyun Hill Tongtian Peak, for a moment was speechless. Silence enveloped the grand hall. What should come, eventually still does. Reverend Dao Zan slowly got up, his face solemn, slowly said, Everyone, the world's fate is now here. Now that the demon beasts had taken over Heyang City, soon they will attack Qingyun. I will not say anything more here. Everyone please return to have a good rest. In the days to come a battle of life and death with the demon beasts. Everyone looked at each other, after a moment slowly stood up. Whisperings and hushed conversations gradually filled the crystal hall, and it was also in this muffled din, the crowd began to walk out. Reverend Dao Zan turned to Puhong Master and Yun Yilan, who were sitting beside him, said, Both please take a rest, I have something to do, we'll need to have a discussion with the other Qingyun sect branch leaders. Puhong Master and Yun Yilan both stood up, returned the greeting and said, Reverend please go ahead. Reverend Dao Zan returned the greeting, called Xiao Yikai. Xiao Yikai quickly went up and followed Reverend Dao Zan into the inner rooms. At a certain place, the rest of the elders were already waiting there. Lin Jingyu watched them leave and then walked out by himself, walked aimlessly to the railings outside Crystal Hall, gazing out from the railings, the firmament dark like ink, the dark clouds heavy, not a trace of sunlight. The mountain breeze like knives, woo-woo whistling, cutting raw across his face. He stood quietly but in his mind, unexpectedly recalled that mysterious note, and the 4 unexplainable words on it. Fire in one's backyard, fire in one's backyard, fire in one's backyard. What fire in one's backyard? Lin Jingyu's mind kept turning. Finally, his thoughts slowly gathered to one point. Xiao Yikai's stunned words resounded beside his ear. Lin Jr. brother, what is it about the back of the mountain? Back of the mountain, Lin Jingyu again frowned, although his eyes were piercing, but he was slowly shaking his head, feeling puzzled again. The contemplation again took a long time, until when he finally came out of his thoughts, he discovered that there was already nobody around. Lin Jingyu sighed, slowly walked down the steps. Ever since the appearance of the demon beasts, Qingyun sect increased the defense around Qingyun Hill in full force, especially the mountain ahead. Nobody knew when those innumerable vicious beasts would charge up. But Qingyun Hill had always been precipitous, especially Tongtian Peak, which was even more lofty and pierced through the clouds, easy to guard and hard to attack, but for those cultivated martial artists, that was not a big obstacle, but to the majority demon beasts which could not fly, it was an excellent defense. Just that all along, the places where the demon beasts traversed were all flattened. Numerous rumors also carried terrifying news. Nobody could be sure that those demon beasts would not come up with unexpected ways of attack, and furthermore, the legendary beast deity until now, nobody knew his exact details, adding further to the people's fear. Compared to the front of Qingyun Hill, the back of Qingyun Hill seemed to be totally sheer cliffs and precipitous rock faces. Apes and monkeys would find it hard to cross. Even though it was so, Qingyun sect still arranged quite a number of disciples to patrol the skies, to guard against the unexpected. Just that there was one strange thing. At Qingyun sect restricted illusory moon cave and at the area around the founder's ancestral hall at the edge of the restricted area, the number of Qingyun disciples was extremely little, almost as if Qingyun sect was not at all worried about these two places. And right now, the dim dark night had just passed, the dawn was just breaking, the lofty Tongtian Peak towering into the sky. On the small path leading to the founder's ancestral hall and illusory moon cave restricted areas, faint mist filled the air, following the gentle drift of the mountain breeze, lingered between the pine trees lining the path. At this moment, not even the birds' cries were heard, the damp air condensed into crystal beads, flowing down the green leaves, quietly dripping. Not a trace of human figure. Suddenly, a figure appeared on this path. It was ghostly. He looked indifferent, couldn't tell any signs of fear and worry of being in the enemy's territory, also not any tension of being near the restricted area, only expressionlessly slowly walked on. This path, he had once walked, a decade ago. 10 years later, as if the scenery remained the same, nothing had changed, the evergreen pine and cypress, the exuberant grasses and trees, even the earth he was stepping on, seemed to be as soft and wet as that time. Just that, he was the one who had changed. The mountain breeze traversed the tree's branches and blew his clothes, ruffled his hair. Xiaowei, who was crouching on his shoulder, looked to be still sleepy, its eyes drooping, its tail coiled around Ghostly's arm. However, Ghostly's eyes was strangely bright. This small meandering path, headed deep into the mountains, the faint mist gently spread opened in front of him and quietly closed up behind him. Walking in this haze, he only walked forward, never looking back. Walking along the path, he soon arrived at that three-ways split road. Slightly to the left was still the deep, serene small path, and to the right, behind the forest, indistinctly revealed a few houses' roof eaves. That should be the founder's ancestral hall, Ghostly thought in his mind. 10 years ago, he with Lin Jingyu together fought against the evil sect powerful enemy, and it was also here, Lu Shuiqi confrontation with him. And now, he with those times, those old friends, like strangers. Rustle, rustle. The faint sounds were heard coming out from the forest, seemed like someone was up early sweeping, a melodious sound. Ghostly stood quietly listening, out of trance, as if time, actually at these faint rustled sounds, quietly rippling echoing, quietly slipping away. Suddenly, like waking up from a dream, he abruptly turned back, the quiet atmosphere instantly as if congealed, even the distant faint rustling sounds, seemed to pause, silent. Behind him, unknown since when, stood a person in black, a black veil covering his face, Mr. Ghost. Ghostly's pupils slightly contracted, in a deep voice said, "You have come too." Mr. Ghost quietly said, "Yes." Ghostly said, "What are you here for?" Mr. Ghost shook his head and said, "I am here to lend you a hand." Ghostly sneered, said, "What did you say?" Mr. Ghost lightly said, "You don't have to doubt, there are some things you do not know, I have came specifically to let you know. There is no traps outside the illusory moon cave, but in it, there is a high-quality formation. It is the spirit guarding the Zhu Xian ancient sword. The source of it is no different than Zhu Xian sword formation. If outsiders wish to force their way in, it will activate the formation and at the same time alarm the Zhu Xian sword formation. Then the consequences will be only death. If you are confident that you can defeat that Zhu Xian ancient sword, then I have nothing to say." Ghostly's pupils contracted, and in the distant haze, that faint mist seemed to tremble. Mr. Ghost looked at Ghost Lee, said, originally it is extremely difficult for our evil sect people to enter this illusory moon cave, but you are an exception. Looking at the whole world, other than Qing Yun sect head and elders, only you will be able to enter. Ghost Lee was silent for a moment, coldly said, what do you mean? Mr. Ghost said, this formation will surely use Qing Yun sect handed down generations Taiji Zan Qing Wei Shang Qing realm as key. Once you know the mechanism well, you can enter it, and after entering it, the illusions will fall like rain. Whether you are able to remain steadfast, it will depend on yourself. Ghost Lee looked deeply at the black figure, was silent for a long time, said, why are you telling me so much? Mr. Ghost smiled. The black figure in the mist appeared to be swaying, like a spirit, faintly said, you don't have to care so much, anyway I have finished my words, believe it or not is up to you. The mountain before Qing Yun Hill Tong Tien Peak, a young Qing Yun disciple who was sweeping the fallen leaves aside, was about to take a break when he saw a figure walking up slowly from the stairs at the foot of the mountain and dressed in Qing Yun robes. Although there were many Qing Yun disciples, but this person for the past 10 years had traversed this place innumerable times, they had long been familiar with him. Lin's senior brother. The young child with a tender voice, smiled and came up to him, said, you are here so early. Are you going to the founder's ancestral hall at the back of the mountain again? Lin Jingyu smiled and nodded, yes. Last night I didn't sleep well at all, my heart keeps feeling stuffy, as if something will happen, so came up earlier today. The other children who were also cleaning the area also gathered over. One of them asked, Lin Junior brother, heard that the demon beasts have already reached Heyong City at the foot of the mountain, will they attack up here? The other children immediately started to add in, but they were after all still young, not as worried as those well-known figures, although they were also worried about the demon beasts, but they were much more optimistic. Influenced by their optimism, Lin Jingyu's mood improved a lot. He smiled and said, oh, the demon beasts are fierce and vicious, presumably they will come attack Qing Yun. What? Like a pot exploded, the children started to make a racket. Lin Jingyu smiled and comforted them, motioned to them to quieten down and then said, but don't we right now have the elders and seniors here at Qing Yun Hill? Their skills are powerful and cultivation profound, definitely not afraid of the demon beasts. Beside, Lin Jingyu's face revealed a trace of mysterious, said, we still have the invincible Zhu Xian sword formation. Have you forgotten? The children became excited, he laughed, said, yes. Yes, we have Zhu Xian sword formation, we will surely win. Precisely, when the demon beasts come, let them all die under our founder's sword formation, seek revenge for all of the commoners. Listening to their words, Lin Jingyu with a smile, nodded. At the end, he gave them some instructions and then continued walking to the mountain rear. Leaving those carefree children, his expression suddenly looked solemn, walked silently. After a long while, he suddenly sighed, shook his head, mumbled to himself, better hurry to the back and seek guidance from senior. While speaking, he hastened his pace, headed towards the founder's ancestral hall behind Tongtian Peak. And while he was walking with his head bowed low, the layers of hazy mist at the back of the mountain floated gently, like a dream that was never awakened from last night. The three-way junction, Ghost Lee and Mr. Ghost stared at each other for a long time. Strange glints moved in their eyes. Mr. Ghost also did not back away, looked directly at him. After a long while, Ghost Lee, without speaking, suddenly turned and walked toward that deep and serene small path. Mr. Ghost behind him, watched him go. But at this time, suddenly, an old voice from the path to the founder's ancestral hall floated out from the white haze, an indescribable tired vicissitudes tone, an old man's voice, both. Where are you planning to go? Ghost Lee and Mr. Ghost were startled, turned around and looked. The mist separated on the path, a bended figure slowly walked out. He was slightly bent over, as if the years were pressing and suffocating him, knife-like wrinkles on in his face, as if recounting the time wasted. Even the broom in his hands, at the moment it seemed to be as dilapidated as the owner. Just that, this old man slowly walked on, about 6 kai away from Ghost Lee and Mr. Ghost, facing these two figures. This slightly tired old man, when he slowly lifted his head, his bright, piercing gaze, stared ahead. The early morning is chilly, the sleepy birds have not awakened, both willing to have a bowl of hot tea with this old man. Chapter 164 Plotting. Morning, a cool wind gently blowing at Qing Yun Hill, causing the mountain mist to slowly turn, like a thin gauze floating in the dense forest. The three-way intersection outside the founder ancestral hall, Ghost Lee, Mr. Ghost and the cleaner elder stood in a triangle, facing each other in a delicate atmosphere. The wrinkles on the old man's face moved, speaking slowly in a husky voice. both are not from Qingyun Hill. Why did you come secretly to this sacred Qingyun place, and for what reason? Ghost Li was silent, his eyes assessed the old man for a moment. Mr. Ghost stood 6 feet from him. With both of their skills, they need not fear anyone, but between them, very obviously neither trusted the other. However, at this moment, Mr. Ghost's eyes, hidden behind the black veil, had been staring at the old man. His eyes, bright and piercing, looked like it had another strange feeling. That old man seemed to sense something, turned shakily around and looked at Mr. Ghost, said, "This master, you have been staring at this senile, do you perhaps have any words to say?" Mr. Ghost suddenly laughed and said, "You are just an old man guarding Qingyun Hill Founder's ancestral hall. Why did you have to meddle? This young man here," he pointed at Ghost Li, said, "he has long heard of Qingyu Hill Illusory Moon Cave and wants to go in and take a look. Will this old gentleman let him pass?" Ghost Li, standing at a distance, suddenly coldly sneered, said, "Before coming up, you and I have already agreed. I will enter Illusory Moon Cave to distract Qingyun sect while you will take the opportunity to sneak into Qingyun Founder's ancestral hall, destroy all of Qingyun sect ancestors' spirit tablets and humiliate Qingyun sect. Why is it that when we are here, you are still not going in?" Mr. Ghost stifled, looked at Ghost Li. Ghost Li's face was solemn, his expression serious and stern. Even if he was to refute his words, it would also be hard for others to believe. Mr. Ghost looked at him for a long time, as though giving a wry smile, slightly shook his head. The old man looked at Ghost Li and looked at Mr. Ghost again. His face gradually turned cold, the sharp gaze in his eyes slowly turned bright, indifferently said, "It seems like no matter what, both have ill intentions against Qingyun. Just that Qingyun sacred ground, senile me have been looking after for many years. If both intend to wreak havoc, will have to be first over my body." He said it so indifferently, facing the two mysterious and unfamiliar characters, slowly straightened his body. In the dense forest after the early morning, the distant sounds of crisp bird cries suddenly paused and disappeared. Only the mountain mist which filled the mountain was still drifting, lingering around them. Decades of time in life seemed to quietly flow past in this stillness, became the crow's feet at one's eyes. Mr. Ghost suddenly said, "How is your left hand? Still good?" Ghost Li and the old man were stunned at the same time. Ghost Li naturally did not understand the reason for Mr. Ghost's sudden words, but the old man obviously trembled, both of his eyes staring at Mr. Ghost, unable to move. In the early morning, in the mist, the old man stared for a long time, suddenly heaved a long sigh, the stunned expression slowly disappeared, unhurriedly said, "It's you." Mr. Ghost smiled and said, "It's me." He paused, his eyes looking at the old man's face, even his voice carried some emotion, said, "These past few years, why did you age so much? Look at you like this, who would still recognize you as the once famous Qingyun sect Wanjianyi?" The old man heard the words, Wanjianyi. His body suddenly trembled, as if the 3 words were like sharp knives, one by one stabbed into his heart. Even his aged scarred face revealed agitation rarely seen. Wanjianyi, Wanjianyi. He muttered the name, complicated and anguish expressions appeared on his face. Ghost Li frowned. Wanjianyi, this name, he had heard it before when he was still Qingyun sect disciple, just that he never expected this legendary presumed dead for many years figure would still be alive, and that the one which caused an internal strife among the Qingyun various branch leaders and Taoist Kang Song who because of that person, betrayed Qingyun, would actually turned into such a humble old man. The cold wind blew past, brushed past the clothes of the 3 people. In this misty surreal mountain, the past seemed to reverberate around here too. Until, the once Wanjianyi, once viewed the world with arrogance, now instead a wrinkled old man, slowly looked up. Pay, a light sound, issued from his hands. Ghost Li and Mr. Ghost both looked over at the same time, saw light gray powder streaming down. The decrepit broom in Wanjianyi's hand, in his agitated mood, was crushed into powder, scattered onto the ground. The mountain breeze blew, blowing away the powder on the ground little by little. Wanjianyi stared at the residue in his hand but now disappeared without a trace. Following which, he lifted his head and stared at Mr. Ghost, word by word said, "If it wasn't for you that time, I would have become an invalid. I am indebted to you and I have always remembered it." Mr. Ghost lightly said, "You and I felt like old friends at the first meeting, at Northwest Wildlands and that Puji monk." Ghost Li, who had been standing silently by the side, suddenly shook, his eyes glimmered brightly. Mr. Ghost and Wanjianyi did not notice Ghost Li's expression change, continued, "Although the 3 of us were from different sects, but at least we have made acquaintance once. Now that Puji has passed away for many years and there wasn't any news of you for a long time, unexpectedly we can still meet today. My trip to Qingyun is considered not in vain." His words of feelings conveyed his emotions. The tensed expression on Wang Jianyi gradually relaxed, sighed and said, "Yes, I never thought that. I can still meet old friends." Stop there. Halfway through his words, his voice suddenly turned urgent, broke off with a shout. It was Ghostly who had silently turned around, unwilling to listen to the two of them speaking about the past, walked off by himself towards the illusory moon cave. Wang Jianyi sneered. He only raised a hand. His withered palm out of a sudden seemed to become bigger and longer like 1,000 times, grabbed from the back like a giant claw. Ghostly paused his footsteps, did not even turn back. The spot where his wrist was shaking, a flash at the top of his head, a circular image drawn in the air, instantly surged with light. It was Taiji image, dark green light glimmering. Wan Jianyi's giant claw was held up by the light, immediately deflected back, but in just this short time, Wan Jianyi's withered body was already before Ghostly. A shocked expression once again appeared on his face, said, "Taiji Zan Qingwei. Who exactly are you?" Mr. Ghost's voice was heard from behind, said, "He is an important figure at the current evil sect Ghost King sect." Ghostly frowned but still did not speak. Wang Jianyi assessed him with a few glances, nodded his head and said, "So you are the Zhang Xiaofan who was cast out of Qingyun sect 10 years ago and joined the evil sect?" Ghostly's face like frost, coldly said, "Move." Wang Jianyi did not have the slightest intention to give way, but after assessing Ghostly, suddenly sighed and said, "Tian Junior brother is actually able to cultivate out a disciple like you. It is really great." Ghostly's expression changed but immediately snorted, his face showing even some arrogance, as if regarding this celebrated Wang Jianyi as nothing, stritted and walked. Wang Jianyi straightened his body, clasped his hands behind, showed not a sign of avoiding. Watching as the two approached nearer, Wang Jianyi suddenly frowned, his body rose sharply from the ground. Almost at the same time, the ground below him groaned, instantly cracked, flashing with cold dark green light from the soul devouring, shooting sharply out. Wang Jianyi in the air, his body swayed, suddenly with a loud shout, shook the surroundings. He actually barehandedly grabbed towards the soul devouring which was pursuing over. The sinister orb at the tip of the soul devouring immediately glowed brightly red, lines of dark red strands all lighted up, mixed in the black light, even without hesitation, charged straight ahead. Black gases surged and rolled, red lights flashed darkly, in an instant all around them darkened down, but Wang Jianyi unexpectedly charged down, as if the unearthly harsh atmosphere had no effect on him. Ghostly's countenance changed. This level of cultivation and skills, it could be said this was his first time seeing it. Looking like Wang Jianyi was about to grab this ominous object in his hands, but in this short moment, suddenly in the black-red light, on the sinister orb, a strange pattern surfaced out deep from within, from small to big, from dark to bright, in an instant standing out from the black air in strange lights, brilliant golden light. It was a Buddhist incantation, Wan, a burst of vigorous and pure force, within it a certain strangeness, hit back at Wang Jianyi's palm. Wang Jianyi and Ghostly moved backwards at the same time. The soul-devouring magical weapon in the air also flew back to Ghostly's hand. Wang Jianyi paused in midair, his face slightly pale, staring at Ghostly, spoke word by word, "The great Brahman wisdom." Ghostly expressionless, but he was stunned secretly. The level of cultivation of this person in front of him was really unfathomable. These 10 over years, this was the first time he saw someone who was able to resist soul-devouring evil power barehandedly. While he was secretly shocked, he did not know the shock that Wang Jianyi had. Wang Jianyi at that time was already an exceptional rare talent. His skills far surpassed his fellow sect's disciples. Other than Reverend Dao Zan, who was comparable to him, he viewed the rest with disdain. Later on, although he met with misfortune one after another, his fate bumpy and rough, but this day facing this junior, that innate air of arrogance in him was still as before. Just that after exchanging moves with Ghostly, he was really surprised. The evil power of the sinister orb was strange and ferocious, although he looked unharmed, but it had already influenced the agitation of his body's blood. And when Ghostly displayed the Buddhism true way, the great Brahman wisdom, merging Taoism and evil sect true ways together as one, perfectly, even him with his level of skills, was at his wit's end, forced to retreat. He could not help but was greatly shocked. The cold wind, suo, blowing past the scene, the mist gently drifted, looking like it was about to disperse. Wang Jianyi looked at Ghostly for a long while, nodded his head and said, "It really is, every Zhongshan generation has its talent. Didn't expect that in my remaining years, this old man can still meet someone like you. Considered at least heaven did not let me down." Ghostly frowned, did not quite understand the meaning of his words. Only Mr. Ghost, who was standing at the back, softly sighed once, seemed to feel the old friend he once had. After many years, that arrogant and obstinate spirit still had not changed. But just when he was sighing, that pair of eyes glimmered with strange glint, staring intently at Wang Jianyi. Ghostly coldly said, "Make way." Wang Jianyi looked at him, that young man in front of him, cold and arrogant, that expression suddenly looked so familiar. He suddenly laughed out loud. His expression had that slight bit of forlorn but soon replaced by lofty sentiments, gave a long laugh and said, "Good, good, good," as expected a young man. The mortals in the world by right should be disregarded. But if you want to cross, then you have to depend on your own ability. Ghostly with a long whistle, did not speak much, leapt up. Wang Jianyi's pupils contracted, suddenly moved back, his body flew to the edge of the dense forest, his right hand grabbed one pine tree which a person could wrap one's arms around. With a loud shout, in that instant the surroundings quaked, in the rumbling sounds, the huge pine tree was uprooted, like a giant arm horizontally in the air. Wang Jianyi's hand propping up the giant tree, standing imposingly in midair, where was that once wretched stooped appearance? Looking at him, highly spirited and vigorous, his face excited, his features wide opened, it was that unparalleled look of that time. "Come," Wang Jianyi shouted loudly, like a thunder passing by, "you have the sinister orb, come take a look at my Qingyun giant tree." His body wavered, in that instant the tree moved, woo-woo, a sound, in a blink turned extremely swift, the sky was all of the tree's shadow, blotting out the sky and covering the earth, charging over, the urgent sound of the wind, there was no longer other sounds. Ghostly's face changed greatly, flipped in the tree's shadow, that giant tree was like a giant surging wave, and also like an endless tide, waves after waves, each higher than another, pursuing under the clear sky. The mountain mists also seemed to tremble. The wind passed through the trees, turned into a violent wind, evolved into a vortex in the air, swallowing up the world. Ghostly was in the heart of the vortex, surrounding him were the dancing shadows of trees, the strong wind cut his face like knives, it was as if he wasn't careful, he would be cut to pieces by this sharp object. Wang Jianyi was laughing wildly non-stopped, as if once again he was back to the time where he ruled the world, his face expression looking even more excited, all of his attention on Ghostly. Ghostly in whirlwind, suddenly clenched his teeth, the tree shadow like a mountain looming nearing, this time he did not dodge, raising his right hand, the soul-devouring glimmering with eerie dark red light flew out, in the hundreds of trees' shadows, with a poof sound, accurately nailed itself on the tree. In that instant demonic power danced, streams of red lights leapt up from the sinister orb, winding past the trunk, where it passed by, the bark split and cracked, broken debris flew up. In that instant, 1/3 of the tree trunk was already devoured by this evil power, but Wang Jianyi was not surprised, instead he laughed, with a long laugh, chopped down with his left hand, the tree trunk brushed past by the invisible wind, immediately like tofu, was cut off. The front part of the trunk enveloped by the red light, issued a moan and dissolved into powder, scattered into the wind. But Wang Jianyi, who was in front, propped up the trunk remnant, like propping the sky, his might and power unexcelled in the world. The sky filled with trees' shadows immediately disappeared, the storm ceased, the violent wind stopped, the entire world seemed to pause in their breaths, all watching that figure flying in the air. He descended from the sky, with a loud shout, raising the trunk rumbled down. The forceful wind shrieked, rushing over with a piercing sound, 3 jongs radius on the ground, with a crashing sound, stones and sands instantly flew out, only Ghostly alone with his clothes flapping in the wind, his face pale, staring intently at the giant tree descending from the sky. That strange whistle was like thunder shocking the ears, in a blink arrived, Ghostly clenching his teeth tight, suddenly both of his hands waved around, Taiji image spinning rapidly, rising abruptly up from the top of his head, blocking in front of the thunderous tree trunk. The two great forces collided with a crash in midair, even the land and mountains around them also seemed to shake, the ground below Ghostly, his feet had already sank in. The front part of trunk was compressed by the great force of the Taiji Zan Qingwei road, splitted completely, the wood splinters flew out everywhere, in a blink again turned into powder, scattered without a trace. But the trunk still pressed on, stabbing down inch by inch on the Taiji image glimmering in the dark green light. Ghostly's face turned paler, the demonic light of the soul-devouring surged brighter, the Buddhist incantation again appeared, below the Taiji image, golden light shining, laying down another layer. The violent wind whistling, almost nobody could breathe, the wild wind ravaged, the two men in the green dense forest mountain fought each other oblivious of everything, each refusing to give way, except that dark figure flickering indistinctly. Wang Jianyi with an impassioned look, even the deep wrinkles right now had all disappeared, as if his time during his youth many years ago, all returned to his body at this moment. That period of once endless excitement, haughty laughing at the world. He made a long cry to the sky, like a dragon making a roar, that feeling of the violent wind hitting his face, like his entire body blood burning. He laughed loudly and dashed down, all of his entire acquired skills burst forth onto that trunk, his entire lifetime of cultivation like a fire flame, rumbled out. The Buddhist incantation instantly dispersed. Layers of heavy pressure, like toppling the mountains and overturning the seas, pressed down, blood trickled out of Ghostly's lips, his pale face suddenly another flush of red, spitted out a mouthful of fresh red blood, spraying onto the soul devouring. Fresh blood dripping, quietly merging in, the icy cold breath, reverberated deep from the heart. Both of his eyes turned blood red. By a hair's breadth, suddenly, the howling violent wind in the sky stopped, the gods' shocking ghosts' worrying malevolent atmosphere disappeared, the figure like a celestial figure so mighty and powerful, suddenly started to waver, gradually losing strength. A dark shadow, swiftly brushed past behind Wang Jianyi and Ghostly's true ways which had long been amassed, suddenly without the pressing power, immediately burst forth, dark green and golden lights, dark red demonic power, the three true ways merging into one great force instantly burst up into the sky, hitting squarely onto Wang Jianyi's chest. In that instant, sounds of bone breaking like beads falling, pi pi pa pa sounded ceaselessly. Wang Jianyi paused in midair, did not flew out, only that his body out of a sudden slacked down, starting from the chest, his entire body muscles seemed to lose their support, started an irreversible shrinking. Ghostly was stunned. The next moment, he subconsciously caught Wang Jianyi's body. When his body landed in his hands, that aged body again told him, this was such a fragile old man. When the body was flipping down, he clearly saw a black palm print at the back of Wang Jianyi's body. Ghostly carrying Wang Jianyi's body, landed, he and the breathless Wang Jianyi at the same time turned back, the black figure standing among the mist which had not dispersed, it was Mr. Ghost. The glint in Ghostly's eyes were like demonic fire, burning fiercely. He coldly said, "What did you do?" Mr. Ghost ignored him and instead looked at Wang Jianyi. That old man at the brink of death, was also staring at him, just that, the expression in his eyes looked a lot more complicated. The veil on Mr. Ghost's face fluttered gently, not knowing whether was it also the agitation of his state of mind, only his voice, was still that emotionless. After all these years, are you still like this? Still so trusting towards friends, not a slightest wary? Wang Jianyi opened his mouth, looked as if he wanted to speak, but when his mouth was opened, he vomited out a mouthful of fresh blood. His face turned rapidly pale, as if life was also quietly slipping away from him. Then, he gently smiled, in the blood and pain, faintly smiled once, turned his head and looked at Ghostly. That look, for some reason at the moment, was instead gentle. Ghostly inhaled deeply, suddenly the rim of his eyes felt hot. This old man whom a moment ago, was still fighting till life and death, right now instead he did not dare to look directly at him in the eyes. He silently placed the old man down, stood up, quietly said, "If you have the Dragon Slayer's sword in your hand, I am definitely not your match." Wang Jianyi looked at this young man, both of his hands tightly clutching, his body seemed to be slightly trembling. Then, Ghostly turned, stared at Mr. Ghost. Mr. Ghost did not avoid his stare, even the despise, disgust and abhor look which Ghostly did not bother to conceal, he did not seem to care. Ghostly silently stared at him for a while and then without speaking, turned around and walked towards the mountain trail to illusory moon cave. Soon his figure disappeared, leaving only two people at the scene. Mr. Ghost slowly walked to Wang Jianyi. The helpless old man lay on the ground, slowly raised his eyes, looked at him, blood continued to flow out from his mouth. At this moment, suddenly, footsteps sound was heard from a distance. It was someone coming up, traveling through the mist, looked like the person would soon arrive. Mr. Ghost's countenance changed, black shadow swayed, in a blink disappeared into the mist. A moment later, Lin Jingyu figure flashed out from the mist, arrived at the scene and saw everything clearly. The faint smile instantly froze, an incredulous expression in his eyes. That old man who had for the past decade lived with him, was covered in blood and lying weakly on the ground. Ah! Lin Jingyu dashed over, a look of despair on his face, and he totally did not discovered. Behind him, a black shadow flashed past. Chapter 165 Illusory Moon. Senior, what happened to you? What has happened? Lin Jingyu rushed to Wang Jianyi, kneeled down, both of his hands trembling and trying to support him up, but where his hands touched, were all softness. A chill went through his heart. Lin Jingyu, like in a bottomless ice pit, felt not a single area on this elder's body where his bones were whole. Who is it? Who is it? Lin Jingyu's voice suddenly turned hoarse, his teeth biting down hard on his lips, blood flowed instantly, even his eyes were cracking with anger and despair. Senior, he cried out softly, choking, and finally cried. He never knew that he could cry. Before this weak-old man, the despair 10 years old seemed to envelop him once again. Wang Jianyi weakly looked at the young man, looking at him in despair and in grief, to the extent where it could not be fake. Maybe, after all, there was still someone who was sincere to me, Wang Jianyi thought to himself. His fingers moved and then, as if the gods took pity on him, he raised his hand shakily. Lin Jingyu was shocked, grabbed his hand, anxiously said, Senior, do you have something to say? Who made you like this? I will seek revenge for you. Who is it? Wang Jianyi's face turned more and more pale, even his breathing slowly turned low, but for some reason, his eyes turned sharper, his hand in Lin Jingyu's palm, his fingers slightly moving. Lin Jingyu was startled for a moment, looked down, in the center of his palm, that weak old finger, stained with blood, gently scrawled to sketch out the strokes. Be careful. Suddenly, behind Lin Jingyu, in the stretch of mist, a black shadow flashed. Mr. Ghost, with his eyes glowing, stared over. Lin Jingyu was back facing Mr. Ghost and fully concentrating on Wang Jianyi's finger, sensed nothing at all. However, Wang Jianyi saw. His gaze silently met Mr. Ghost's across the distance, as if 100 years of time had passed by. The vicissitudes of life that once. Wang Jianyi suddenly smiled, a smile of blood, facing Mr. Ghost, then he shook his head. Lin Jingyu waited for a long time, but Wang Jianyi did not continue. He lifted his head in shock. Wang Jianyi's head drooped to the side, he had already stopped breathing. Lin Jingyu's body shook, both of his hands trembled, staring disbelievingly at the face which had lost its life. After a long while, he cried out loudly, Senior. The anguish cries were heard from him who had thrown himself on the old man. Mr. Ghost stood quietly behind him, staring at the aged old face of Wang Jianyi. After a long time, quietly retreated, disappeared into the mist. From a far distance, a faint sigh was heard. Wolves howled from the foot of the mountain, carried by the wind. Sharp, vicious roars continued unceasingly. At the summit of Qingyun Mountain, the crowd of human heads and shoulders stirred. The good faction members had gathered at Tongtian Peak summit. Standing at the forefront was Reverend Dao Zan, Puhong Master and Yun Yilan, etc., their faces solemn, frowning tightly, gazing down towards the foot of Qingyun Mountain. The faint smell of blood could be detected indistinctly in the wind, invoking thoughts of the innumerable cruel and vicious demon beasts below the mountain. Nobody knew, after this calamity, what would be the result. At the public square outside Crystal Hall, the crowd stirred but was silent, everyone looked solemn. It was also at this quiet moment, suddenly, a long whistle rushing to the sky was heard from a distance, like a wolf howl, like a ghost wail, sharp and piercing the sky, pressing from afar. Following the source of the sound, it seemed to be from the foot of the mountain, but the sharp cry penetrated into the clouds. For a moment everyone turned pale. The sharp cry circled and reverberated around, made a few turns at the precipitous summit in the white clouds, then slowly lowered. But when it was about to cease, abruptly below the mountain, 10,000s of the beasts roared in unison. The numerous roars towards the sky converged as one like an avalanche. Heaven and earth changed countenance, rumbling over. The clouds with a rumble dispersed. The steep mountain peak, a mass of black gas rose from the foot of the mountain, gathering more and more, turning denser and denser, accumulated at the sky opposite Tongtian Peak, until it blocked out the sunlight. The black clouds gradually drifted to this paradise-like place. Not sure who was the first to shout out, everyone turned over. Deep inside the dark clouds, in the whipping wind, a young man dressed in bright silk clothing, stood standing with his hands clasped behind, his face expressionless, indifferently watching the people at this mountain. In the eyes of the heaven and earth, what is this thing called human? He waved gently, his stare seemed to pass through this mountain. At the foot of the mountain, the thousands of beasts roared, the bloody smell came in waves, the miserable cries finally arrived. As if he had sensed something, Ghostly paused, frowned slightly and turned, facing towards the mountain before Tongtian Peak. Heavy dark clouds in the horizon, the violent winds howled, although not very far away, but the weather was completely different from the mountain behind him. The warm sunlight, spilled down from the sky, shone onto his clothes. Ghostly slowly looked away, subconsciously looked to his shoulder, but Xiao Wei was not there. This trip to the illusory moon cave, he deliberately did not bring Xiao Wei. The dangers involved were obvious, he himself was not confident too. The fight with that mysterious old man just now, although Mr. Ghost lent a hand, but Ghostly felt an inexplicable feeling towards that old man. The thousands years of Qingyun sect history, it was really a place of crouching tigers and hidden dragons. Not long ago, wasn't he also a part of it? He pursed his lips with an indifferent expression, again started to walk ahead. The strips of lands beside the small path were similar to the previous path, dense woods everywhere, evergreen pine and coniferous, thick vegetation, only this mountain trail meandered forward, leading to the unknown mystery. Deep inside the woods, faint crisp sounds of the birds' cries could still be heard indistinctly. It seemed that scene of catastrophe at the mountain ahead did not have the slightest impact on this mountain. Peaceful atmosphere filled the place, even the air was still permeated with a clear cold taste. Ghostly initially had a hint of anxiety. In this tranquil environment, very quickly his emotions became calm, to the extent that when he first lifted his head and saw illusory moon cave, the 4 words, facing one of the world's famous place, he instead did not have any slightest expression, as if looking at an ordinary mountain cave. And in fact, in front of him, it did look like an ordinary cave. Taller than half of the average person, the entrance was about 7 kai wide, appeared on a gentle hillside. Next to it was green vines and thorns, some drooped over the entrance. When the mountain breeze blew over, the vines gently swayed. And underneath the green vines, on the stone above the entrance, engraved with 4 words. Illusory Moon Cave. Other than the meaning of these 4 words itself, the entire surroundings including these 4 words, were so unostentatious. Could it be that this was the origin of Qingyun sect for 2000 years? The book that contributed to numerous outstanding talents and heroes, including Qing Yunzi and Qing Yi founders' nameless ancient book, was it just quietly lying in here? And that world-stunning ancient sword? Ghostly silently looked at the 4 words. The time and weather-battered words seemed to be also silently staring at him. He did not speak, and did not heave any sigh. The next moment, he walked in, as if stepping into the past. It was not as deep and secluded as he had imagined. Appearing before him was a simple stone room. One glance and he could clearly see all of the furnishings in the room. A few stones piled at a corner. The slightly damp corners of the walls had indistinct mosses. The only difference with the outside was that it was especially quiet in here. Entering the cave, it was as if everything suddenly turned quiet, like being cut off from the outside. Looking away from the surroundings, Ghostly's eyes landed on the stone wall facing the cave entrance. On the flat stone wall, a slab stone of Taiji diagram was inlaid. This was the only object which could be associated with Qingyun sect in this cave. Ghostly deeply inhaled, went up, stopped in front of the Taiji diagram. There were many marks on the diagram. Most of the places had signs of damage, evidently from ages ago. Ghostly silently looked at this thing, the words of Mr. Ghost slowly reverberating in his mind. The next moment, he gently placed his hand on the Taiji diagram. Faint dark green light emitted from his palm. Ghostly expressionlessly looked at the light from his hand, felt the familiar Taiji Zan Qingwei energy flowing in his body meridians, the energy that once belonged to this mountain. Like being awakened from a slumber, the peaceful atmosphere in the room was broken by a faint sound. Like the entire cave dwelling was softly sighing, something started to rotate, and then, the Taiji diagram also started to light up with dark green light. At the same time, the diagram started to turn. From left to right exactly 1 round, the stone walls with a sound of ka, everything stopped. Ghostly took back his hand and quietly waited. The moment of silence disappeared instantly. Deep rumbling sounds were heard from the cave. At the right-hand side of the diagram, the perfect whole stone walls had cracks forming a ring, and then it slowly rotated to the side, opening up, revealing a secret entrance. But this entrance had a grayish-white mist-like thing floating in it. It looked like mist and also seemed to be water ripples, revolving non-stop. In it looked hazy and surreal. Ghostly looked at the water mist. Mr. Ghost after all did not lie to him. But in this mysterious water mist, who knows what was in it? He did not hesitate, like he did not even contemplate, straight it in. Water mist enveloped him. His figure soon disappeared and the 2 stone walls quietly rotated back, this time, gently closed up, revealing not a single mark. In a trance, in the haze, in the deep firmament, a flash of lightning passed, stunningly struck across the long dark night, turning into a huge lightsaber from heaven, so dazzling bright, nobody could watch it directly, stabbing deep and straight into the heart. Then, from the pitch-dark firmament sky, a strange moon glimmering with unusual silver light rose, hung high in the horizon. At that moment, the mind was blank, everything was forgotten, only the eyes still staring ahead, behind that white light. There seemed to be sound of deep, hidden bitterness, someone was softly weeping, but then there was a familiar laughter, wah, an immature cry, and finally started crying. For some reason, he held his breath. An inexplicable tension, his heart palpitated, wind seemed to blow past his ears, but he could not feel his own presence, like a pair of eyes searching for something, finally saw. That tiny small village, and that dilapidated thatched temple behind the village. Delivered yet? A man's voice asked anxiously. Delivered already. Mother and child are safe, it is a boy. The midwife's voice carried delight, loudly said, Congratulations. He, the honest man good-naturedly laughed, the genuine feelings had some relief and rejoice. The next moment, he saw the crying infant boy, the infant who was still nestled in the arms of his parents. What shall we name him? The father of the child. The mother, sounding weak but still had a smile of happiness on her face. The father thought for a while, said, We are illiterate, I would say the most learned person in this village will be the school teacher, Mr. Lin, at the east of the village. Whenever the village has a child, isn't there names given by him? Why don't we go request him to name? The mother nodded and the father went out. After a while, he walked back in, carrying a smile on his face, holding a note, said, Mr. Lin said, people like us, the most important thing is to be safe and not to forget our place, and to just live our lives well, so he gave 3 characters, written on this. The mother joyfully said, Oh, a learned person is really different, what name did he give our son? The father with his rough hands brought the note to the mother and hugged mother and the sound asleep infant with his arm, lowered his voice, as if he had utmost reverence and tenderness for those 3 words, quietly said. Zhang, Xiao, Fan. Rumble. A shock of thunder suddenly was heard from the firmament, the sky actually rained, his whole body suddenly shivered, breathing hard. The rain outside the house, the sky like ink, the Qingyun mountains in the distant looked savage, in the wailing wind and weeping rain, the father and mother hugged together, their serene faces smiling, gazing at the infant in their arms. He wanted to shout out loud but he could not make any sound, thousands and thousands of words spinned rapidly in his mind and in the end they only formed 2 words. Father, mother. The rain full of sky, all seemed to fall onto his face, the coldness penetrating into the bones. The illusory moon glimmering with faint light in the horizon. Pong! A stone thrown from the sky, it seemed to pass through his body and landed behind. The sky had unknowingly turned clear, a group of children was running around the village, playing and laughing out loud. The ordinary-looking boy was running with his might at the fore, some bigger-looking boys leading a group of kids was chasing him and shouting loudly, Zhang Xiaofan, stop if you have guts. The child at the fore with a sound of pay replied while running, You think I am an idiot? And instead ran even faster. Chasing all the way, those children soon approached the thatched dilapidated temple at the east of the village. Looking from the outside, the temple was in ruins, not knowing how many centuries of weather it had bore. Zhang Xiaofan was the first to dash in, the rest of the children soon followed in that dilapidated small temple, the voices of children were heard. He stared, his mind suddenly another blank, a feeling of inexplicable fear, its tendrils snaking out buried deep in his heart, filling up his mind. One step, another step, he quietly approached the thatched temple, went near the nightmare that seemed to have disappeared a long time ago. A bigger, young boy with delicate features was riding on Zhang Xiaofan's body, his face showing conceit, smiled and said, Caught you, this time you have nothing to say right. Zhang Xiaofan rolled his eyes, said, Doesn't count, you made a sneak attack on me, how can that count? The boy was surprised, bewilderedly said, When did I sneak attack you? Zhang Xiaofan said, Lin Jingyu you are good, you dare say this door plank is not placed by you here. The boy who was called Lin Jingyu loudly said, There is no such thing. Zhang Xiaofan pursued his lips, cocked his head, a look of determination not to yield, not to submit. Lin Jingyu was angry, with one hand strangled his neck, angrily said, We agreed that to admit defeat once caught, do you submit? Zhang Xiaofan ignored him. Lin Jingyu with his face red, increased the force in his hands, loudly said, Submit or not. Zhang Xiaofan's throat was choked by him, his breathing gradually turned difficult, slowly his face also started to turn red but even at his immature age, he was very obstinate, refused to make a sound. Lin Jingyu became even angrier, increased his force, kept repeating, submit or not, submit or not, submit or not. Submit or not, submit or not. This voice suddenly like an avalanche, reverberated in his head, the years of heartache, in this incessant shouts, gushed up his heart. Then, like he had once anticipated, and also like he was unprepared, the hand that quietly stretched out in time, withered and full of wrinkles, so familiar, so intimate but not so long ago, it was that shocking, with boundless hatred. The old monk, smiling, still that amiable and kind, stood in front. The next moment, his world was completely blank, the rest of it, the village, children, disputes, all suddenly disappeared, only that compassionate and gentle old monk, smiled at him, like a painting that never faded in the distant time. His entire body trembled, an indescribable grief and indignation deep from within his heart surged up his heart, he could not control and held long at the sky. The sky, when did it turn dark again? There was wind and rain, quietly falling. Chapter 166 Intense Fight. The thick stench of blood enveloped Tong Tien Peak of Qingyun Hill. Even the spiritual water Kylan guardian who was usually languid, at the moment also appeared restless, constantly swimming back and forth in the ice pool and making low roars. And the various good faction people who were in the crystal hall, every one of them looked grim and looking down to the foot of the mountain. After the Rainbow Bridge was the huge Yunhai public square. At this moment, a fierce and brutal fight had been going on for a day and night. Translator's note. Yunhai literally means a sea of clouds. I am not sure which one it meant, so I used Yunhai for now. Even though they had already expected the horror and cruelty from this fight with the demonic beasts, but the harsh reality of the scene still struck a chill into many good faction members' hearts. The demon beasts attacked up the mountain, like a gale of storm sweeping across, although the good faction members continued to make attacks from the sides, but the enormous torrent formed by the innumerable beasts did not care about the small number of enemies making sneak attacks, like a thunder rumbling, like an angry tide, sweeping up, routing whoever instantly. And those people who was trying to obstruct an attack, felt helpless, facing the black masses, killing one or two or even a dozen demons, it almost did not amount to anything. And like that, their original strategy of using the mountains, natural defenses to slow down the beasts, in a blink, were damaged beyond repair by those brutal beasts. The good faction men were forced to retreat up Tong Tien Peak, until the beasts reached Yunhai Public Square. Reverend Dao Zan and the rest acted decisively, gathered and concentrated most of the good faction strength, to face the enemy at the public square. At that moment, brilliant lights from the hovering magical weapons in the sky, above Tong Tien Peak Yunhai, flesh and blood sprayed, miserable cries heard incessantly. The dark tide, waves after waves crashed over frenziedly, and before them, hundreds of good faction people, half stood on the ground, half in the air. Numerous colorful brilliant lights created a colorful cold city wall, emitting ice-cold light. The demon beasts, as if they knew not pain or fear, like a huge tide surged over, at the almost several miles wide light wall, crashed onto it with their bodies. In that instant, the dazzling gleam quivered, lights flashed crazily, the chilling cries like a dense shower of rain instantly swept past Tong Tien Peak summit, piercing directly deep into the heart. The several hundreds beasts at the forefront at that instant were turned into minced meat and blood by the cold brilliant light. The thick blood stench like a violent wind, whoop brushed past the ears, the sky of blood rain burst opened with a crashing sound and slowly fell, little by little, landed on the good faction people's faces, hands, making one nausea upon smelling. Before they could compose themselves, another wave of beasts had arrived. The initial smooth light wall immediately received an enormous crushing force. A number of areas were pressed in, creating an irregular crooked site. And there were even a few areas, disciples with slightly weaker power, undetermined will who did not hold their weapons properly. With the huge impact, in the loud roars, instantly when the beasts charged up, several fell onto the ground. In the tragic cries, no one again saw them. Outside Crystal Hall, Reverend Dao Zan, Puhong Master, as well as Yun Yilan looked grim. Reverend Dao Zan glanced at the both of them, both nodded at the same time. Yun Yilan said, "We will follow senior brother's lead." Reverend Dao Zan expressionlessly turned back, looked down at the foot of the mountain for a while, saw above Yunhai, that screen of light was pressed tightly by a huge wave of black. Among the people, a few of the weaker ones was swaying in their places, looked like they could not hold on much longer. At times miserable cries were heard, and the smell of blood in the air was turning more and more intense. His brows wrinkled, abruptly looked up, saw high above the sky, the dark clouds loomed. In the horizon where the wind and clouds scurried across, there seemed to be an indistinct mysterious figure. Reverend Dao Zan stared deeply, after a moment, turned around. Xiao Yikai, who had been following behind him, stepped forward. Reverend Dao Zan indifferently said, "You can go." Xiao Yikai acknowledged and quickly turned around, waved his right hand and flew up first. Following behind him was close to 100 good faction people, although the number of people was not as much as the people at the square, but the brilliant lights from their magical weapons were dazzling, far surpassing the disciples below. At one glance, obviously they were all elite disciples of the various good factions branches and some independent immortals. Under the leadership of Xiao Yikai, the group of people flew down to the critical fight in the square. The clash of thunders, lightnings scurried around randomly in the sky. It looked as if they were back to that storm many years ago. Just that for some reason, even though the sky was raining, there was still an unusual bright moon in the horizon, very bright and very white. The feeling of rain hitting upon the face, so cooling. Zhang Xiaofan woodenly looked back, the wind and rain whistled, that tiny small village, finally quietly faded. He could not help but reached out and tried to catch something, but only empty air. Just that behind him, Puji, that pair of eyes, quietly looking at his figure. The next moment, he was already in that familiar room, the unique smell of the big bamboo valley, as the surroundings surfaced, so familiar and intimate. Distantly he could hear his senior brother's chats and faint laughters, and Da Huang and Xiao Hui's frolicking sounds, and that so familiar footsteps sounds. A young girl smiling like a flower, burst into the room, laughed and shouted, "Big lazy bum, quickly get up, go up the mountain and do your homework of chopping the bamboos." His body trembled. Suddenly, the wall of defense he had built up in his heart for several years shattered, collapsed. Tears flowed down his face. The withered palm stretched out from behind, tapping him gently on the shoulder. That kind voice whispered, "What's the matter, boy, why are you crying?" Zhang Xiaofan whipped around, looked at the compassionate face, his body could not help but tensed. He stared deep into the eyes in front of him, longing to see deep inside this kind old monk's heart, but Puji's gaze had always been so calm and deep, no matter how hard he tried, he was unable to see. One word by one word, as if he was growling, asked, why did you choose me, why must you do that?" Puji did not answer, still looking that compassionately at Zhang Xiaofan. Other than benevolence, it was still calmness, there was no agitation of emotions, not to say any regrets. Everything around him disappeared again, leaving only the two of them in the whole world. Zhang Xiaofan, no, looking at him right now he seemed to have transformed into the devil. Fierce blood-red gaze once again took over his eyes, from head to toe emitting an aura of killing intention. A light sound, his clothes splitted opened at the front, the soul-devouring evil stick glimmering with faint dark red light rose up, horizontally in front of his chest. Puji's eyes finally was shocked for a moment, slowly looked to that ominous object. At the top of the stick, that sinister's orb that was glowing brightly right now, lines of dark red covered the entire orb, as if it was also staring at him, with a feeling of sneer. The heavy choking stench of blood appeared suddenly before ghostly out of thin air, and then it rushed over like an avalanche, like a violent gale blowing. Puji's monk robes flapped in the wind, staring blankly. That vicious red light with a trace of despair, like a trapped animal, charged over. He did not show the slightest intention to evade, standing there, motionless. The next moment, that despair and fierce red light passed through his body, stopped slowly behind him, condensed to form Ghostly's figure. The old monk slowly lowered his head, slowly looked at his body, and then, he sighed, his head hung down, his body slowly fell to the side. Behind him, Ghostly abruptly turned around, looked at Puji, the expression on his face like a violent storm, rapidly changed. Gradually, the ferocious look quietly faded, the anguish look again surfaced, the red light in his eyes dimmed. He stared woodenly at that body which was slowly losing life, in that instant, made a heart-wrenching scream. Ah! The black stick fell to the ground, he seemed to lose all of his strength in an instant. Thunders exploded in waves in the sky, thunder rumbled and lightning flashed. In the whistling wind, a chill landed in his heart. He stumbled to Puji, the soil underneath his feet seemed to have become muddy, every step consumed a great amount of his energy. He kept falling and climbing up again, using all of his strength he crawled to that withered body, and finally, he struggled to Puji's side. With one grab, he firmly grasped the withered hand. These past several years, this, the most intimate palm grasped in his hand, his eyes were already wet. Teacher, he choked back, quietly crying, tears streaming down his face, with some hysteria. Why, what exactly is this for? Puji struggled to turn around, looked at this man who as if had once again became that helpless young man, his face was so pale, his lips trembling. However, eventually he did not say anything. The withered palm, slowly raised, stretched out in front of the young man's face, shaking non-stop in the storm. All of the wind and rain seemed to fall into his hand. Zhang Xiaofan stopped crying, raised his head and looked at him. Both of their eyes met in the storm, both stared at each other, froze, became still, turned unfamiliar and distanced. Puji's lips moved, as if he wanted to say something, but he did not, following which, his hand gently fell, without the slightest sound. Life seemed to have left in that instant. The young man was stunned, his entire body seemed to have turned rigid, slowly bent his head, looked at his hands. I killed him, I killed him. Then, like the surrounding strange atmosphere, a strange change suddenly happened in his body. The next moment, his face revealed a ferocious, vicious look, turned into ghostly. The next moment, appeared extremely in pain, as if he had turned into that once simple Qingyun disciple Zhang Xiaofan. Just beside the body of Pu Ji, he struggled in pain. In the sky, under the firmament, the wind and rain still howling, a scene of desolation. Xiao Yikai and the other elite disciples joined the battle, immediately controlled the situation. And this group of disciples obviously already had an understanding among themselves. Forming into small groups, they flew straight to the most intensive part of the battlefield. The gaps which had been attacked by the beasts, suddenly received backup from these new forces, immediately bounced back. Those beasts which were attacking, in a blink of an eye, beheaded and reduced to nothing. The entire screen also turned brighter and more solidified, indestructible. Among the crowd, the most dazzling place would be the center of the screen. Lu Shuiqi holding Tianya's celestial sword, like a fairy from the 9 heavens, stood proudly in the clouds. In the thousands rays of light, Tianya like a bloody knife of massacre, rains of blood sprayed wherever it went, broken fragments of bones, piled up to a small hill under her feet. As the time wore on, not to mention those ferocious beasts having some apprehension towards this cold beautiful girl whose clothes had turned from white to pink, even the good faction members behind Lu Shuiqi, were all shocked. At this battlefield of life and death, Lu Shuiqi did not care for life or death, sweeping the length and breadth, often charging into the mass of beasts within a hair's breadth apart, raising showers and showers of blood of rain and wind. But, on her face, there was not an expression at all. There was no fear or pain, no shock or abhor, even the bloody stench of the beasts, blood which had spilled onto her, she who had always loved cleanliness. Lu Shuiqi did not have any reaction. She only fought on, using all of her strength. In the rain of blood and wind, her cold yet beautiful face seemed exceptionally touching, shocking the rest, and no one dared to go near. An hour passed by quietly. The black torrent was still pressing against that light screen, but in the end did not break through it. The public square, which was once like a paradise, had lifeless bodies and stains of bloods turning into rivers. In the dark sky, the dark clouds loomed low, coldly watching it all. Suddenly, deep from within the beasts, from an unknown place, suddenly a strange sound rang out, like a horn but also like a howl. The sound seemed mournful and forlorn, as if on the night of the full moon, there were lone wolves howling to the moon. Following the sound, the masses of beasts which had pounced forward one after another, unafraid of death, suddenly stopped their attacks and then slowly retreated, creating a distance from the good faction. And over at the good faction side, the light curtain following the temporary ceasefire, also started to dim down, and in the next instant, filling above the sea of clouds, was the heavy panting sound of countless people. On each and every one's body, seemed to be stained with blood. The desolate and strange color of blood dyed the entire sea of clouds. On the stretch of open space created between both sides, there were bodies everywhere, some demons, some humans. Most of the good faction disciples whom were in the air had descended, seizing the time to catch their breaths. Who knows when those barbaric beasts would attack again? Only a few highly skilled disciples was still flying vigilantly in the air, watching the front. Xiao Yikai frowned tightly, looked away from the distance, the demon beasts a stretch of masses, black and pressing, unable to see the last of them with a glance. At this battlefield of life and death, they were still unable to see the end of it. He gently sighed in the heart, turned around, suddenly was stunned, saw not far from him, Lu Shuiqi was quietly standing in midair. The stench of blood blew over, the clothes dyed red by the blood gently fluttered. On that unparalleled face, there wasn't any trace of anger, only staring ahead, at that mass of black. Xiao Yikai's brows wrinkled, intuitively felt something was very wrong with Lu Shuiqi's emotions, was going to go up and ask when suddenly in the mass of beasts, a roar was heard once again. The next moment, like the sound of thunder rumbling, the galloping sound of footsteps, the black torrent like an unceasing tsunami, again charged over. And this time, among the beasts, other than those ferocious ones, there were giant demons, bearing fangs and brandishing claws, heading over. In that instant, the good faction people each started to stand up. The brilliant lights of the weapons flew up dancing to the sky, once again forming an enormous curtain wall. Xiao Yikai was immediately distracted, the momentarily uncertainty of Lu Shuiqi, he had cleanly forgotten. At the moment, in everyone's eyes, was only that black tide, from far approaching, galloping and howling, carrying the breath of death, surging over. Like a thunder in the silence, tearing the heavens and earth, the deafening sound this time, was from the crash of the black tide against the light screen. The pressure of death seemed to have instantly increased, the broken bodies and bones once again fell upon like showers of rain, bodies torn up were thrown into the air, piercing onto the sharp claws. The giant demons which had joined the battle far exceeded the ordinary beasts, most of the good faction's weapons had no effect on their bodies. And when those creatures, sharp claws swiped past, instantly it would be a scene of blood, rain and wind. In a blink of an eye, the good faction who was caught off guard by these 7, 8 giant demons, a few gaps appeared in the light screen, the entire light screen immediately wavered, struggling to stay up. High up above, Yun Yilin, Puhong Master and the others' countenances changed. Yun Yilin frowned and looked to Reverend Dao Zan but saw him looking grim. The tragical cries below the mountain traveled over, the corner of his eyes seemed to be twitching but for some reason, the distinct ordinary-looking face did not have any expression, not a word or gesture too. Yun Yilin looked away, was silent for a moment and once again looked down to the foot of the mountain. The fights turned more and more intense. The good faction disciples at Yunhai all knew the fight had reached its critical phase, everyone was desperately fighting, using all of their strength, even to the extent that most of them at this moment, made hysterical howls, no different from those beasts, maybe, even if they were good faction people, in the face of life and death, probably not much difference from those demonic beasts. Chapter 167 Forbidden Place. The flood of demon beasts looked infinite, wave and wave crashed over crazily, with those gigantic demons as the arrow's head, viciously smashed onto the good faction's light screen. The light screen wavered and looked shaky, the young disciples started to look afraid. Xiao Yikai frowned, he knew that if they do not repulse those gigantic demons, most likely the situation would get out of control. Xiao Yikai gave a shout, called out to the surrounding disciples and took the lead to charge to the gigantic demon which was nearby. Just when his figure moved, a gust of strong wind blew from behind. Out of a sudden, a figure flashed past him like lightning, heading towards that demon. Xiao Yikai looked at that figure and was startled a moment. Although the figure's clothes was dyed red with blood but the figure was graceful, cold and beautiful, it was Lu Shuiqi. Above the innumerable black demons and good faction's light screen, Lu Shuiqi, going against the wind, headed straight up, towards that demon which was several times larger than her. A figure appeared beside him. It was Zheng Shushu, he who had always been fine and delicate was also covered with blood and dirt, urgently said to Xiao Yikai, "Xiao senior brother, let's quickly go help her." Xiao Yikai quickly nodded and rushed up. The gigantic demon that they were heading to, was that white-boned demon snake which once appeared in southern border Miao tribe's 7-mile cave. Under the dark clouds, its skeleton was cast a strange pale color and the 3 pairs of brightly colored wings connected directly on its bones, beat non-stopped, looking even more strange. Right now, the snake coiled its almost 3 jongs long huge body up, flapped its wings behind, its tongue constantly flicking, emitting gases of black air, glaring at the light screen. Every time its giant head brushed past, immediately some good faction disciples who were slightly lower skilled, died a violent death, either bitten to death by the huge mouth or poisoned by the black poisonous gas, perished when the poison reached their hearts. The white-boned snake killed many in succession, looking at the good faction disciples scattering away before it. Its giant mouth opened and closed, although there was no telling its expression from its fleshless face, but evidently it was extremely contemptuous. And just when it was at the peak of its contempt, a white shadow suddenly flashed before it. There seemed to be a light shout, a cold clear voice, a beautiful woman appeared out of thin air, the blue celestial sword in her hands flashing with a brilliant light, striking down from the air. A roar was heard from the white-boned snake's skeleton. It did not have the slightest intention to avoid. Ignoring the Tianya celestial sword, it opened its giant mouth, revealing 2 white eerie giant fangs, biting down towards Lu Shuiqi. That bigger-than-human fangs glimmering with cold white light, descended from the sky. Lu Shuiqi, facing that terrible scene, her face's expression unchanging, ignored that demon snake, Tianya celestial light shining even brighter, charging up to the sky, in the blanket of black gases, like a phoenix cry in the 9 heavens. That instant it severed the black gases, split the dark clouds, before the demon snake could react, chopped down 3 kai below the white-boned snake's head. See, ka. The deep, low muffled sound seemed to emit from deep within its body. Initially it was a deep low sound, in a blink it seemed to be the roar of a wild beast. The white-boned demon snake was stunned for a moment, momentarily ceased its attacks, looked down and saw on its chest bones where Tianya had struck. A faint crack suddenly appeared, growing bigger rapidly. The next moment an explosive crackling sound was heard, smashed bones splattering. Tianya's celestial sword was a 9 heavens celestial weapon. Even though it was an unparalleled evil animal, it was also hurt by the Tianya sword. The demon snake made an earth-shattering wild cry. 2 balls of fire like unearthly fire suddenly erupted from its deeply sunken eye sockets, evidently extremely incensed. Immediately ignoring the rest of the people, shaking its huge head, lunged straight towards Lu Shuiqi. And at this moment, Xiao Yikai, Zheng Shushu etc. had already arrived, shouting in unison, their magical weapons flying up at the same time, with Lu Shuiqi's Tianya celestial sword block the blow which was as powerful as a thunderbolt. But only deafening crashing sounds were heard, the light beams flashed crazily. Xiao Yikai and the others felt a great jolt to their bodies, almost fell from the air. Fortunately they were all outstanding talents from the young generation, their skills level were not low, each stabilized their body but looking at each other, they looked pale. This level of terrible monster, the powerful strength of the demon was really unexpected. It was an effort even when they combined their strengths, not to mention behind it, that mysterious beast deity. Although they repulsed the snake but the people was not to be trifled with, not one of their weapons was mediocre. Several blue, white, yellow lights shot up, landed heavily on the snake's skull, one even cracked a small piece of bone. The demon snake again roared, the unearthly fires in its eyes surged, almost without any moment to rest, again madly attacked, obviously abhorred this group of people. Xiao Yikai, Lu Shuiqi, Zheng Shushu all flew up. The demon snake's attacks were too fierce, in any case they could not block it, and following its gigantic mouth attack, thick black poisonous gases shot out, a feeling of nausea even from afar. Without any choice, the group with their agile reflexes surrounded this huge snake and started to besiege it. At the scene, there were a total of 6 gigantic beasts, but after the initial panic, with the elite disciples led by Xiao Yikai, ranging from some to several people, contained these beasts. Although the demons were powerful and not only they were unable to gain victory, it caused a strain on them, but eventually they controlled the situation. The light screen once again started to become firm. Outside the crystal hall, Reverend Dao Zan and the rest were looking solemn, their brows frowning tightly. The battle was turning intense. There was no telling how many number of livings in that wind and rain reeking of blood had instantly lost their lives. Reverend Dao Zan watched the situation below, in the crowd, without even mentioning the innumerable black suppressing beasts. That 6 gigantic demons, right now seemed to gaining morale, with Xiao Yikai and the elite disciples fighting many to one. At the moment were all slowly showing weakness, looking like they could not hold on much longer. Reverend Dao Zan with his solemn face, looked for another moment and then again to the sky, that infinite dark clouds in the firmament, rolling and surging, getting lower and lower. Yun Yilin coughed once beside him, quietly said, Dao Zan senior brother, the situation now, is it? He did not continue on, but Reverend Dao Zan was not a slow person, naturally understood, and right now the situation was indeed turning dangerous. He turned his head to Yun Yilin, nodded his head, said, Valley Master, don't worry. After speaking, he looked behind him. Behind the 3 of them, several branch elders were standing behind them. They were either gray-haired or carried celestial demeanor. It could be said these Qingyun sect elders and the other seniors of the other branches were already the last strength of the good faction. Reverend Dao Zan was silent for a long time, finally slowly said, everyone, head down. Nobody spoke. After Reverend's words, the last several of them, some slightly nodded or cupped their hands in return gestures. Light beams instantly scurried across. The last several elders of good faction leapt up at the same time, headed towards the foot of the mountain. And outside Crystal Hall, other than Reverend Dao Zan, Pu Hong and Yun Yilin, there were still 6 people. It was the other branches, leaders of Qingyun sect other than Tong Tian Peak. For some reason, surprisingly they did not enter the battle. Reverend Dao Zan faced them, nodded his head and said, everyone, seems like the situation is at its critical juncture. That matter in the original plan will have to depend on all of you. Among the 6 leaders, Qi Hao and the other newly appointed young juniors came forward to pay their respect. Only Tian Buyi, Zheng Shuchong and Shui Yu Master, The three of them looked calm. After listening to Reverend Daoxuan's instructions, the rest of them also seemed to be aware of the matter. Their faces did not reveal surprise, only an indistinct hazy look seemed to flash past Tian Buyi's face. Immediately the 6 people made about a Reverend Daozan and then flew up. However, they all headed to different directions, seemed like they were all flying to their own mountains. Only Tian Buyi for some reason, paused and turned to look at Reverend Daozan. Reverend Daozan was surprised, said, "Tian Junior brother, what is it?" Tian Buyi hesitated a moment, lowered his voice, said, "Sect head senior brother, after the heaven secret seal is opened, the vicious energy of Zhu Xian ancient sword will increase greatly, the backlash of the power is an impossible force, you must be extremely careful, do not lose your integrity." Reverend Daozan was silent for a moment, looking solemn, nodded his head and said, "Tian Junior brother, we have known each other for many years, I know what you mean. Don't worry, even if there is to be any incidents, for the common people, I can't care that much too." Tian Buyi's facial muscles twitched but in the end did not say anything more. He looked at Reverend Daoxuan's face, nodded, shook his sleeve, red-yellow light flashed, supporting him and flew up the sky, heading towards Big Bamboo Valley. Intense fighting sounds were heard indistinctly from the mountain ahead, until it reached the rear of Tongtian Peak. It was already inaudible, the faint mist dispersed, faint birds' cries, this place was like another realm. Just that what was similar was, in this tranquil place, there was still shadows of swords glints, bloody covert fightings. The dark green dragon slayer's sword glimmering with faint light, the sword body seemed to be trembling too, as if in mourning. The old man had lost his life, quietly lay on the ground, his head lying skewed. Kneeling beside him Lin Jingyu's face was a terrifying red, a pair of eyes changing with different colors of fury, clenching his teeth tightly, although he was still but in the stillness, indistinctly there was some madness. In the shadows of the woods, the black Mr. Ghost was still there, like a spirit watching Lin Jingyu from the back, his eyes from the fallen Wan Jianyi to Lin Jingyu and in the end, on that dragon slayer sword. Then, he suddenly seemed to recall something, turned his head and looked towards the direction where the illusory moon cave was. That path, cold and lonely, solitary extending ahead, not a single movement seen. Under the black veil, nobody could see Mr. Ghost's expression. Lin Jingyu's mind right now was in a mess. The sudden murder of Wan Jianyi made him fell into a near-madness state of mind. Ever since that upheaval in Qingyun 10 years ago, his mentor-teacher Taoist Kangsong betraying Qingyun, the sudden appearance of Wan Jianyi, his breadth of knowledge and bearing, all became the person that Lin Jingyu revered. For 10 years, he trained hard under the guidance of Wan Jianyi. In his heart he had already regarded this enigma old man to be his teacher and father, had the utmost respect for him. And at this moment, the person that he most revered had become a corpse, lying in front of him, and he did not even know who the murderer was, not to say avenging him. Sorrow, pain and despair agitated Lin Jingyu's somewhat quick-tempered character, making him look as if he was closer and closer to madness. At this time, suddenly from the woods behind, a sound was heard. Lin Jingyu was shocked, whipped his body around, saw movements in the woods, a figure suddenly appeared and then quickly, like lightning, ran out. The speed was astonishing. With Lin Jingyu's level of skills, even he could only see a fuzzy shadow. At this time and place, the sudden appearance of this mysterious figure, what did it mean? Lin Jingyu's body reacted faster than his brain. Almost at the same time, he seized his sword, as swift as the wind and quick as lightning pursued. He did not consider once that if this person was really the murderer and with his level of skills to be able to kill Wan Jianyi, how terrifying this person could be. In Lin Jingyu's heart right now, other than revenge he had no other thoughts. And the 10 years of time that Wan Jianyi taught him, the Dragon Slayer's sword had always been moving forward courageously, retreat was not even an option, like their lives. That black shadow was extremely fast. It had already left the Founder's ancestral hall, pausing slightly at the three-ways junction, with a tsu sound, headed towards the illusory moon cave. Lin Jingyu immediately pursued. His eyes looked as if fire was about to be breathed out. Looking at that indistinct figure, he did not even contemplate. His figure like lightning, instantly entered the small path which was forbidden to Qingyun disciples, toward the direction of the cave. The mountain breeze blew over, the branches gently shook, making a rustling sound. Soon the place fell into silence. Only that desolate old man lay quietly on the ground, looking at the clouds and sky, quietly passing by. Although Lin Jingyu used all of his strength, but he was still unable to catch up with that figure. The 2 rows of trees beside the path whizzed past, but that figure ahead was still faintly indiscernible. Lin Jingyu's initial anger had receded slightly and he could not help but secretly felt alarmed. That mysterious figure's level of skill, he could imagine it, but despite that, Lin Jingyu still did not slow down the slightest, still using all of his efforts to pursue. Just that at the corner ahead, that indistinct figure suddenly sped forward, entered into the dead end of the mountain topography, disappearing in sight. Lin Jingyu was anxious and angry. He used all of his strength, his entire body like an arrow leaving the bow, taut and tight, suo, a sound, and flew straight ahead. Due to the speed and force, a sharp whistling sound was heard. When he reached that corner, although it was only a moment later, that black shadow had already disappeared. Presented in front of him was an ordinary cave, 4 characters engraved at the entrance, Illusory Moon Cave. Lin Jingyu was startled, paused his steps. He had joined Qingyun sect for many years. Naturally he wouldn't not know that this was a forbidden place and disciples were not allowed in. Now that he had trespassed, it was already a serious offense. But he looked around, saw the dense ancient woods. Other than this entrance there was no other unusual spots. That human figure had disappeared like that. His face had conflicting expressions. Hesitation flashed past, but a strange glint was flashing in his eyes. Anger eventually won. He lifted his feet, looking somehow hesitant, but the next moment, he took the first step forward, towards the cave and walked. Contrary to the chase earlier, Lin Jingyu instead walked very slowly, as if the ordinary cave had something that made him hesitate, but even it was so, he soon arrived at the cave entrance, inhaled deeply, clenched his teeth and walked in. The cave was very small. At one glance he saw everything. There was no traces of the human figure. Lin Jingyu was stunned for a moment. Disappointment flitted past his face, but then his gaze fell onto most glaring spot of the cave, the pattern of taiji engraved onto the stone wall. The taiji drawing reflected in his eyes, as if it was narrating the vicissitudes of the passage of time. The dilapidated fringe emitted an ancient scent. Lin Jingyu stared intently at this drawing. After a long while, he slowly stretched out his hand, placed on the taiji drawing. The material, which was neither stone or jade, had a rough feeling of a whetstone sharpening the edges of his palm. There was no response. Lin Jingyu's eyes piercing, used force to try and turn to the side. Without any warning, even the stone wall itself did not show the slightest change. Suddenly a burning heat radiated from that drawing, instantly attacked Lin Jingyu's arm. Before Lin Jingyu could react, his entire arm seemed to be roasting in burning flames. The blood in his body boiled. Immediately his face turned red, his forehead covered with sweat. Unexpectedly such an ordinary taiji drawing concealed such terrifying power shield. Lin Jingyu was shocked, subconsciously wanted to retract his arm. Unexpectedly his arm was firmly held on by some kind of invisible force, unable to withdraw his hand. At the same time, the cave walls around him suddenly began to issue a dull sound, like being awakened from a deep slumber. The eccentric sounds became louder and louder, gradually gathering towards Lin Jingyu, and in just a blink, where his palm was, had turned unbearably hot. Lin Jingyu panicked, clenched his teeth, his body felt like bursting from the hot energy. He could only use all of his skills to resist, used his lifetime of training of Qingyun sect taiji Zan Qingwei and channeled it with all of his strength to his palm, hoping to resist that mysterious heat. Just when Lin Jingyu was feeling dizzy, his body heated up to a critical point. Suddenly, the heat receded, and extremely fast, like a tide instantly disappearing from his body, to the point where Lin Jingyu had not recovered his senses. Then, as if the surrounding strange noises were being appeased, it too slowly calmed down. The cave again resumed back its tranquility. The stunned Lin Jingyu withdrew his hand. That taiji drawing at the same time turned. A lighter and different sound from before was heard from the walls. In front of Lin Jingyu's surprised eyes, the perfect stone walls opened up to 2 sides, revealing an extremely strange hole, and in the hole, a mist-like gas was rapidly spinning. In there everything was hazy, mysterious and unfathomable. Chapter 168 Bonds of the World. Like the lightning tearing apart the black night, descended upon the mortal world. This light beam, which gathered the powerful force of the true way, descended with a rumble from the sky, coming straight down towards the white-boned demon snake, passing straight in from the top of the head. In that instant, a powerful force burst forth from that gigantic body. The surrounding Qingyun disciples were pushed a distance away from the invisible air impact. The demon snake let out a long howl to the sky, its sound shrill. The huge skeleton which supported its body, from the top to bottom, suddenly began to emit a strange light. The next moment, tiny sounds of caw-caw were heard from numerous parts of its body. Beams of light shot out from its bones. Then, Following a loud sound, the demon snake's colossal body came crashing down, creating a deep pit on the white jade stone slabs underneath its body. After struggling on the ground for a few times, it finally stopped moving. The dazzling light beam slowly dispersed, revealing the 7 elders, Lu Shuiqi, Xiao Yikai and the others in the horizon. Beneath them, beside that colossal demon monster's body, corpses lay everywhere. Among them were 4 Qingyun elders lying forever in eternity. And those that were still alive, many were wounded. In the younger generation, Lu Shuiqi, her face cold as frost but half of her clothes were already dyed red. Xiao Yikai fared better, looked fairly good, only Zheng Shushu was making an effort to hold on. After witnessing this monster's death, he heaved a sigh of relief and suddenly his head slanted, fell down unconscious. Everyone got a shock but fortunately Xiao Yikai was just beside him, caught his body, after checking on him, was relieved and informed the rest. The others then felt relieved and following which they continued to join in the battle. Ever since the several elders joined the battle, for the first time this great battle finally started to swing towards the good faction. Those elders' skills far exceeded the ordinary disciples, although their numbers was small but their impacts were great. With the combined efforts of the elders, Xiao Yikai, Lu Shuiqi, Zheng Shushu and the other younger disciples, those few demons although were powerful but were suppressed by those people and finally killed. However, those demons were after all brutal and vicious. The good faction also paid a heavy price. However, in such reign of terror, who would remember the dead comrades? At the moment where the giant snake's body collapsed, the people hovering high up in the sky had already turned around, expressionlessly heading towards the other parts of the battle, to continue the fight and massacre. Xiao Yikai flew to the rear, placed Zheng Shushu at a secluded area and quickly came back. Unexpectedly the next moment, from the corner of his eyes he saw Lu Shuiqi in a daze at where they were previously, staring blankly at that demon corpse, her face pale. Xiao Yikai was puzzled, called out, "Lu junior sister, what happened to you?" Lu Shuiqi was startled, like being startled from a dream, turned and looked over. Her lips moved, as if she wanted to say something but when she saw that it was Xiao Yikai, she closed her lips, took a deep breath and then wielded her sword and flew off, joining the battle again. Xiao Yikai was bewildered, felt that Lu Shuiqi was very strange today but thinking back, this celestial-like junior sister had always been aloof and now that it was the crucial time of the battle, he thought for a while and decided to again leave those thoughts behind, headed into the fight again. The dark clouds rolled over, surging and turbulent. Under the dark clouds, those wild beasts and people both fiercely battled. Just that this war, eventually was turning more and more favorable, and standing at a vantage point, those 3 good factions heavyweights, their initial tense expressions had right now gradually relaxed. Despite paying a heavy price, after the elders joined the war, the 6 all-powerful colossal demons were immediately besieged and gradually suppressed. With everyone's combined forces, first was the white-boned snake, then the other 2 gigantic demons were killed one after another. Even when they were putting those giant demons down, including the elders, the good faction also suffered heavy casualties. However, the momentum of the fight, after all, was being turned around bit by bit. The ordinary demon beasts although were innumerable but following the deaths of the gigantic demons, their vigors were also immediately weakened. The ordinary Qingyun disciples although were not as skilled as the outstanding ones but were more than enough to handle those. At the same time the people joined together as one, the light screen turned even more indestructible. After taking care of about half of the giant demons, more skilled masters headed for the remaining 3 demons and besieged them. Anyone could see that, those giant demons were the war spirits of the demon beasts. And under the besiege of those highly skilled good faction elders with the younger generations, in the sky full of brilliant lights and rare, unusual weapons sharp beams, the remaining 3 giant demons finally were unable to sustain. In the sharp angry shrills and mournful howls, one by one they collapsed. The demon beasts were in a chaos. It was clear that even those ignorant beasts also felt something was not right with the current situation. On the contrary, the good faction felt a boost of morale. Finally that resplendent light screen increased its brilliance, spread out and immediately flesh and blood sprayed and flew, pressing towards the demon beasts. Panic screams filled the air, numerous demon beasts howled to the sky, their sounds mournful. The merciless light curtain arrived with a loud crash. What kind of bloody scene and desolation will it spray out? Then in the numerous roars and howls, in the sky, in the firmament, those billowing black clouds abruptly became still, as if the world suddenly froze, and then, there was a shimmer, from the dark and quiet clouds, shone out a white, tiny light. The next moment, the dark clouds scattered, like a tornado sweeping through the sky and earth, blowing past the sky of wind and rain. From the recesses of the dark clouds, suddenly a huge vortex rapidly spinning out, the innumerable dark clouds after being rolled up, dispersed, leaving not a trace. There was a young man's figure, coming out, expressionlessly watching the battle scene, the bloody human world, from the top, like the legendary gods. His black hair moved in the wind, a black strange monster behind him, looked anxious, restlessly moving around, making low growls. And at his moment of appearance, all of the beasts paused, lifting their heads towards the sky, howled to that figure. The tens of thousands beasts howling, the dark clouds dispersed, as if a vicious current, soared up into the sky, seemed to go up the 9 heavens. Not one of the good faction people did not change countenance. Reverend Dao Zan stood outside the crystal hall, frowning tightly. He muttered to himself, "Is this the beast deity? Illusory moon cave, that surreal and illusory world." That round indistinct moon glimmering with strange light, was still hanging high up in the horizon. Regardless of the wind or rain, it always radiated a faint glow. And the mortals struggling in this world, seemed to have scattered, leaving only one person, alone and lost. "Who am I?" he asked softly, raising his head to the moon. "What am I living for?" He quietly asked like that, not knowing if it was to the indistinct moon in the horizon, or to the recess of his own heart. Half a lifetime of turbulent periods, ferocious giant waves, the past, scene by scene, poured into his heart, the once familiar figures in his life, the people whom he had once sincerely treated, one by one flashed past in his mind, but, all without leaving a single trace, quietly went far away like that. He felt reluctant, subconsciously reached out with his hand, wanted to catch something, but his hand in the air, eventually still grabbed air. Nothing at all, only the moonlight from the horizon, traversed through numerous wind and rain, still spilled onto his body, shone on his clothes. Slumped to the ground, like tearing away all layers of exterior. In this lonely world, he did not need to be strong. The storm gradually stopped, the dust quietly became still. That body looked as if it would soon sink into this desolate world, ending in silence. Just die. The ancient legend said that there would no longer be any pain or thoughts when one is dead. There would no longer be any care or worries, even if it was the 9 netherworlds hell, before the Yama, king of hell, palace, who would know what it would be like. In the bustling mortal world, maybe in the end it would be all empty. But, that silent body suddenly shook. The moonlight in the horizon, seemed to tremble too and then shone down a beam of light, shining on that body. He seemed to be struggling. He seemed to be unwilling. He struggled to get up. Every action seemed to take up all of his strength. The earth underneath his feet obviously had infinite temptation, tempting him to lie down and there would be no worries or cares anymore, and he could break away from the anguish of the mortal world. But he refused to back down, stubbornly trying to straighten his body. His hands bled from the efforts, a deep tear on his lips. In this desolate world, he was still refusing to give up. That faint moonlight, like pouring its heart out, fell onto him, like whispering, "Why do you bother to persevere? Let go and you will be free." He struggled, like an ant in a boundless vast heaven and earth, regardless, facing the heaven and earth that seemed infinite. At the end he looked up, at the sky. Slowly stood up. The familiar face, quietly floated in his heart. In the end, even between life and death, he eventually still could not give up. This life, he still had someone he cared about. Zhang Xiaofan, or perhaps it's Ghost Li, the ant in this world, at the moment was quietly watching the sky, staring at that dim moon in the horizon. The moonlight was unusual and cold. He suddenly shouted loudly, jumped up, leaving this boundless piece of land, straight up into the sky. In front of him, there were gold, dark green and red lights, lighted up out of a sudden, together with his body, heading straight to that moon. The cold moon was silent, but in front of him, the moonlight suddenly dimmed. It was a couple figure, looking at him kindly and with delight, as if the moment of delight of waiting for a night storm many years ago, descending upon the mortal world only now. His heart felt as if a sharp knife had slashed it. His entire body was trembling, but like an arrow leaving the bow, he did not have the slightest intention of retreating. The 3 lights like lightning, under his watchful gaze, stabbed through the couple's bodies, traversing through. The fresh blood splattering, or was it the pouring rain, fell onto his face, a feeling of coldness. The human figures disappeared. He seemed to feel some numbness. However, his eyes were still resolute, heading towards that faint moon. Suddenly, the moon dimmed again. Tian Buyi and Suru appeared. Suru was smiling at him. Tian Buyi was like what he remembered, snorted and flipped his eyes at him. And between them, Tian lingered smiling like a flower, dressed in red, her appearance vaguely 16 or 17 years old, laughed loudly and called, "Little junior brother, let's go up the mountain to chop bamboos." Like being suffocated in that instant, that three figures before him, looking alive, blocking in front of him. The kind of shivers that he felt, like lightning passing through his entire body, a cold light approached their bodies, his heart felt like it was about to tear apart. Finally, three colors lights still passed through it, just like that passing through the human figures. A feeling of chill from his head to toes poured down, his body in the air, his face as white as a piece of paper. Suddenly he opened his mouth, wah, a sound spitted out a mouthful of blood, dyed the clothes at his chest red, his face looking paler. Then, he still looked up, like an arrow leaving the bow, continued to fight on in spite of all setbacks, refusing to rest unless dead, headed to that moon. The moonlight was icy cold, heaven and earth dimmed in that instant, a desolate feeling quietly lingered. At that flint spark moment, looking like he was about to reach the moon, the misty clouds surged over. Suddenly, a figure indistinctly appeared within the clouds. That was a figure, deeply carved into his heart. He was suddenly dumbfounded, his perseverance almost dispersed with the wind. That blurred figure in the clouds flipped, turned and confused. Like a green figure yet like white clothes dancing with the sword. The soul-devouring stick in his hand, emitted ice-cold energy. His heart was once in such anguish because of that figure, just that, right now, how should he advance or retreat? In the deep night, the cold moonlight, far above the horizon, a heart-wrenching roar was heard suddenly, like a dying beast howling to the moon, full of despair and pain. A brilliant bright light, flashing with three strange halos, shot straight into the sky, into the clouds, passed through them and pierced that blurred silhouette. Then, like something suddenly shattered, the sky of pouring rain and wind quietly stopped. There seemed to be tears in his eyes, staring at that figure. Perhaps in close proximity, but he still could not see her face clearly. Only, in the netherworld deep and remote somewhere, there seemed to be a low sigh. The wind dispersed, the rain scattered, the moonlight falling like a cloud. Heaven and earth, the firmament boundless like water. His body fell from the sky, like falling into the abyss, but in his mind there was no fear, some feelings of reluctant, staring at that gradually disappearing figure. The next moment, he had landed on the ground, the surrounding illusions had completely disappeared. Under his feet, a primitive yet clear ancient mirror, was broken into several pieces, fell from the wall and scattered onto the ground. And around him, was a simple cave with solid sturdy rock walls. The mysterious entrance which he came in from, was less than 10 footsteps away. This short 10 steps, he instead felt like he had went through a lifetime, all of the painful memories relived once again. Then, his breathing settled down, focused himself and was about to continue to walk deep into the illusory moon cave when suddenly his body froze, as if he had discovered something and then slowly turned his body. With the broken ancient mirror, the mysterious mist at the entrance also dispersed, revealing a person standing behind him, Lin Jingyu. Their eyes met across the air. For a moment both was stunned. For a long time, they stared at each other silently. Two of the men's gazes, from their childhood to their youth to now, it was as if they had looked past a lifetime. Lin Jingyu's teeth bit deeply into his lips, almost to the point of bleeding, and then drawled out word by word, "That old man at the founder's ancestral hall, was it you who killed him?" Ghost Li was silent, slightly lowered his head. After a moment, he nodded slightly and said, "Yes." Lin Jingyu's eyes instantly turned red. Chapter 169 Red Flame. That youth in the sky, expressionless, his gaze swept over the battle scene below. Even when he saw those giant demons who once protected him, fell one by one, he did not seem to have any reaction, as if he had long seen past all of these life and deaths. The violent wind blew, his figure slowly descended from the dark clouds, the 10,000 beasts' roars turned even more deafening. Even the inky black clouds beside him, had tiny electric-like snakes, scurrying in it. Above the Yunhai, the people and wild beasts who were still battling ferociously a minute ago, turned quiet, involuntarily turned to look at that strange man in the air. On his somehow sinister-looking face, 2 spots of light seemed to glint in his eyes. Finally, the beast deity stopped in the air, above those innumerable beasts. The vicious Teoti behind him glared fiercely with its eyes wide, looking towards the good faction Tongtian Peak, hatefully roared. Hoo-ah! Almost at the same time, following the cry, the 10,000 beasts also cried out together. The sound waves were sudden and like the momentum of an avalanche. For a moment the winds and clouds changed countenance, sands and stones flew, many of the good faction people involuntarily moved back a few steps. The Teoti's body, suddenly expanded with the roar, in a blink turned into an enormous beast, surrounding the beast deity. And beside them, strange things also began to happen. The dark clouds, as if receiving some kind of powerful force, swiftly surged over from all directions, gathered above the beast deity and then rapidly formed into an enormous black wind column, rapidly turning, making sharp piercing sounds, slowly coming down from the sky. That wind column's width was thick and wide beyond imagination, the thickness looked as if it could swallow the entire Tongtian Peak. Right now, the sky loomed low, the wind blew violently and piercingly cold. It was an ominous scene, like Armageddon, creating a feeling of hopelessness to the people. The good faction people's countenance changed. Such divine evil powers, it was really something not seen or heard before. Although the people already anticipated that the beast deity was someone not simple, but they never expected that the evildoer would have such divine powers. And that enlightened master who was able to subdue and incarcerate him in the subdue devil ancient cave for thousands and 10,000s of years, made one wonder who that divine holy person was. The colossal wind column gradually descended, revealing that inky dark and horrible appearance. Invisible suction power started to envelop everyone at Yunhai. Many of the good faction disciples had already started to exert their powers to resist. Everyone knew, if they were to be sucked into this evil power, most likely even if they had 9 lives they might not be able to survive. Outside the crystal hall, Reverend Dao Zan and the others' faces were grim. Puhong Master watched that wind column for a long time, quietly said, "This kind of evil power, it is really something this old monk has not seen in his lifetime. Dao Zan senior brother, the disciples below most likely can't fight against this type of evil skill, why don't we?" Reverend Dao Zan slowly nodded, said, "Master is right, the rightful owner has already appeared, we should also." Before he could finish, suddenly, that colossal wind column which was slowly descending, suddenly increased its speed, headed towards Yunhai. At the same time, the beasts' cries turned even more intense, broke through the clouds, extremely mournful. The good faction turned pale, facing this never-seen-before evil powers. For a moment everyone was at loss on how to deal with it. That wind column looked to be soon approaching the Yunhai. Several brave good faction disciples finally could not take it. With loud shouts, charged towards the column with their magical weapons. The seniors and elders realized with a start, immediately shouted for them to stop, but under such chaotic situation, a few still ran out. The several celestial weapons flashed with rare lights, the lights dazzlingly charged into the wind column, in an instant vanished into it, but like a clay oxen entering the sea, never to be seen. The next moment the wind column, as if it was being stimulated, suddenly released a series of loud sounds. Several grey dark thick whirlwinds, behaved as if alive, headed directly to those disciples. The good faction people were shocked, started to defend, but unexpectedly those few whirlwinds, as if alive. When the others blocked it, it passed through formless, but when it was before those people, the black whirlwinds suddenly revealed a vicious appearance. In the wailing winds, those whirlwinds in a blink surrounded those disciples. Suo a sound and retreated back. The speed was astonishing. Before they could react, they watched helplessly as those disciples were pulled into the strange colossal wind column. In a far distance away, miserable cries were heard indistinctly. In that wind column, blood-red lights flashed suddenly. The next moment, there was no more sound. The good faction crowd was as silent as a cicada in cold weather, each looking at each other. Bright lights suddenly appeared. 3 brilliant lights descended from the sky, landed before the good faction disciples. After it disappeared, Reverend Dao Zan, Puhong Master and Yun Yilan emerged, the 3 of them looking solemn. Reverend Dao Zan waved his hand, urgently said, "All disciples retreat, the various elders to stay." A commotion went through the people, but following which most of the younger generation disciples retreated back. Many of them were from the 3 great sects and naturally knew the seriousness of the situation, therefore at this critical juncture, were still able to maintain their calm and order. Very soon, only 3 masters and several elders remained. In the earlier battle, the originally limited number of elders had lost a few to it. Reverend Daoshuan's facial muscles twitched and then did not look anymore, turned and stared at this great foe whom he had never seen before. The colossal black wind column, under the manipulation of the strange invisible power, descended from the sky. In the black roaring wind, the beast deity youth cold gaze seemed to watch past the world's massacre. Coldly watching, met the stern stare of Reverend Dao Zan. Reverend Dao Zan was secretly shocked. Although the beast deity appeared to be a person, but in his eyes, there wasn't a slightest emotion. In that cold gaze, it regarded all living things to be beasts without spiritual intelligence. The malevolent intention was abnormally intense, like an extremely vicious wild beast. Also at this moment, that wind column descended from the sky and finally landed onto the Yunhai. Instantly the sturdy and solid white jade slab stones emitted a deep groan. the next moment numerous cracks appeared and opened with a loud sound, sands and stones jumped into the air from the quake. And in the wind column, sounds were heard, like a ferocious beast growling, and like a spirit wailing. It seemed to receive some strange call. Suddenly the 6 gigantic demons' corpses, which were killed after much effort from the good faction, started to move. The good faction turned pale. Right now, the sky was without light, a desolate scene, unearthly atmosphere uncoiled around them. That 6 giant corpses staggered and walked, although they were not nimble but like being attracted to some strange power. They dragged their enormous bodies, deep lines were scratched out on the ground, sucked into the colossal wind column. One, and another one, until the last white-boned evil snake's gigantic bones were totally sucked into the black wind column, disappeared without a trace. Following which, like a wailing cry from the 9 netherworld hell, a vicious current from the violent wind came from the sky. The beast deity above the Yunhai looked indifferent, stepped onto the enlarged Teoti's body, like lightning dashed into the wind column. The stench of blood enveloped over thickly. Even the innumerable beasts below also became still. Most lay down, did not dare to breathe loudly. There were even those weaker ones, cowered, their heads trembling. Abruptly, the wind stopped, the clouds still, there wasn't a sound between heaven and earth. Then, the crowd and the beasts held their breaths, stared in shock at that strange beast revealed from the dispersing winds and clouds. Above Yunhai, an inconceivable strange beast hovered. Its body was tall and big, 3 times bigger and taller than those 6 gigantic demons. The crowd and those demon beasts before this monster seemed insignificant, like ants. The stench of smell constantly diffused from this strange monster, to the extent that on its body, blood constantly oozed out from it. White unearthly bones could be seen everywhere. Looking at the huge skeleton, made one quickly realized this was a terrible vicious spirit made from those 6 giant demons' corpses. And standing above this giant monster, was that beast deity. His face looked slightly pale, but in his eyes, the thick malevolent intention was even more wild. The huge ferocious white skeleton head slowly shook, making strange caw-caw sounds. Looking into the empty sockets, there seemed to be an invisible baleful glint, viciously staring at the people in front of it. The repulsive blood stench assaulted one in the face. This reborn vicious spirit seemed to start feeling restless, growled. And other than that, on the vast Yunhai, there wasn't a single sound. Numerous people were holding their breaths and watching. Reverend Dao Zan before the people, his dark green Taoist robes flapping in the wind, his face solemn. Most of the people after the shock, those near or far from him, secretly looked at him. On that Taoist celestial-looking face, there wasn't any expression. Nobody knew what he was thinking at this moment. The gigantic ferocious evil beast with a low roar, suddenly its entire body issued a piercing sound. The humongous body slowly moved, walked forward. Every step, the ground underneath seemed to quake under its weight, deeply sank down. The stench of blood spread everywhere. Rumble, rumble, rumble. This terrible thing walked very slowly, but every step seemed to land in the good faction's hearts. Countless people stared dumbfoundedly at that terrible white bones which piled like a mountain, slowly approaching. Even people like Xiao Yikai also looked pale. That vicious spirit looked to be nearing. The white bones like mountain. Reverend Dao Zan in a deep voice said, "Various brothers, follow me." He had just finished his words. The 3 good faction leaders, transformed into 3 brilliant lights, were the first to fly up, following which more than 10 different brilliant lights followed behind, heading towards that vicious spirit. And above that giant monster, that mysterious young man was indifferent, a pair of eyes slowly reflecting those flying lights. Between heaven and earth, suddenly a blanket of silence, making one feel suffocated. Looking at those good faction brilliant lights streaking across the sky, were about to land, the beast deity's eyes suddenly shrank, without seeing him making any move. But that huge terrible monster below him abruptly lifted its huge savage head, opened its bloody mouth and roared to the sky, quaking the surrounding countryside. The innumerable beasts behind it for a moment whined plaintively. Following the sharp cry, the huge monster, without leaving the ground, opened its mouth directly towards those flying lights and bit down. Looking from afar, that savage-looking huge mouth, with one mouthful it could swallow all of the good faction people. Just that, those several people were all good faction masters, elites among the elites. Even in the whole wide world, the good evil demons shaman, each faction, were all #1 figures, their cultivation levels even more not to be underestimated. As expected, that demon monster, although was vicious and ferocious, but the different lights in the air at the same time dispersed, heading towards different directions. The next moment several elders emerged, hovered in the air, each with a shout. Their magical weapons lighted up and attacked the monster from different directions. And above the clouds, Reverend Dao Zan, Puhong Master and Yun Yilan appeared. Yun Yilan was the first to make a move, his left hand flicked in the air and a fire appeared in his hand, like a jade of pure yang, appeared out of thin air, its luster and color like amber. It was Fenchong Valley Inferno fire, enigmatic art which had reached the ultimate attainment. That fire, like a solidified object, looked to be small, burned in his hand, his palm flipped, his face looking solemn, both hands danced, like a meteor streaking across the sky. That flame of pure fire, flew out, seemed to slowly turn in the air, seemed impatient, headed towards that vicious spirit. At the moment the other elders had already wielded their weapons, attacking towards the terrible monster, on the huge white skeleton, hit at many places by the different lights. Just that this monster, after being hit by these elites, although its body shook but under the powerful blows that would disperse a normal person's soul, it was actually unharmed. It only howled in succession, although uncomfortable and looking angrier by the minute, it roared hatefully. In the air, the flame created by Yun Yilan emitted an amber light. It was tiny but remained as a whole, flying towards that monster. For some reason, that monster although showed no fear towards the surrounding besieged weapons but towards this tiny flame, it looked to be hesitant. Its body seemed to shrink back, but too bad its body was too huge. How could it avoid it? The next minute, this spot of flame landed beside the ferocious white skeleton's lips, on the eerie white bones, touched down. See, in the chaotic clamor, that inconspicuous tiny sound, tiny small amber-like flame, on the unbreakable mountain-like sturdy white bones, burned through it, making a deep burned yellow hole on the bones. And that spot of flame also disappeared into the deep hole. The crowd was stunned, held their breaths and looked at each other. After a moment, suddenly, a deafening rumble exploded out from deep within the white bones, like an erupting volcano had suddenly emerged deep inside the savage white bones body. Fiery hot waves instantly spread out. Half of the white unearthly skeleton was burned a withered yellow. A red flame as white as Zhong's exploded out from the bones, shot up to the sky. Even the Qingyun disciples at a distance away actually felt the unbearable heat, not to mention that monster whose body was in the flames. For a moment, the good faction's cheers resounded like peals of thunder. The three good faction great sects' leaders' skills were really extraordinary. Like a volcano erupting, the overbearing hot flames started to burn off. The monster, which was enveloped by the intense fire, slowly emerged. Half of its body was burned black, although it looked even more terrible, but its appearance was in a much sorry plight than before, not a slightest vicious look. The good faction people, who initially were struck dumbfounded by the appearance of this monster, began to feel relief, heaved out long breaths. Come to think of it, with Reverend Dao Zan etc., these kind of enlightened, celestial-like figures around, what was there to fear about the demons and devils? Just that, for some reason, compared to those jubilant young disciples who were standing at a distance away, the three good faction heavyweights standing above the clouds, their countenances were strangely dark. Chapter 170 Decisive Battle. Looking at the heavily wounded, ferocious, spiritual, intelligent monster, it looked somehow to be in a sorry state. Half of its body was ghastly white while the other side was burnt black, looking rather weird, even slightly comical. Just that those distant mocking laughter from the good faction disciples, this gigantic terrible monster slowly lifted its head, suddenly made an angry roar, its huge head opened its terrible mouth, a black gas-like tornado burst forth, heading straight to those three in the midair. Reverend Dao Zan and the others with their current level of skills, naturally would not be idle. Their bodies leapt up high several jongs, at the same time their bodies were enveloped in black, green, gold, red, three brilliant protective lights. However, even if it was so, that black gas above this Yun high, in the violent winds, it did not disperse. Its strange pungent smell could be detected over the distance, evidently extremely poisonous. At the same time, the beast deity above the giant monster expressionlessly waved both of his hands, his position strange, his movements crude. It seemed before the ancient times civilization, the movements during the far back ancient times to worship the heavens. Following his actions, invisible strange forces surged over. The dark clouds in the sky once again gathered, thick and dark like ink. Lightnings flashed and scurried within the clouds, illuminating the layers of darkness. The people on the ground were shocked, not knowing what evil skills were displayed. Just that ever since this beast deity appeared, the strange shaman skills he used were all devastating. Everyone was all secretly afraid. And in the midair, Reverend Dao Zan, frowning tightly, suddenly waved, ordered all of the elders to retreat. The dark clouds hung low, pressing very, very low. Finally someone noticed something amiss and cried out, following which, under everyone's stunned gazes, that layers and layers of dark clouds hung lower and lower. finally from the 9 heavens, landed onto the mortal world, and on this Yunhai, swallowed the beast deity and that gigantic ferocious monster in. The dark clouds seemed to be at least several jongs in circumference. The good faction people pulled back and many of those demon beasts who were at the Yunhai were enveloped within it. Reverend Dao Zan and the others descended, stopped several jongs away from that black clouds, their faces grim, staring intently at that rolling surging black clouds. On the Yunhai, right now it again descended into an eerie silence, just that, this stillness eventually was unable to remain for long. That black clouds gathered speed, even those people standing afar, could feel the evil surging power within it. Finally, that mass of enormous black air, facing Reverend Daoshuan's direction, opened a small opening. Without any light, like an eternal darkness, that inky black small hole coldly faced the front, the surrounding clouds suddenly spinned crazily, heading towards this small hole. And this small hole seemed to have no limits, swallowing all of the black air, slowly expanding, from 1 kun to 1 kai, from 1 kai to 1 jong. In a short time, a most terrifying savage ferocious beast's face appeared before the 3 leaders. From the recesses of the darkness, an wild and shrill roar, burst out with a rumble. Instantly, all of the dark clouds moved and swayed, the entire mountain of Tong Tien Peak shook, that terrifying figure had totally turned red, flew out from that black dark hole, like an enormous beast howling to the sky, pounced towards Reverend Dao Zan. Everyone changed countenance. That beast deity young man who was standing at the top of this chaotic situation, looked up and howled to the sky, his clothes flapped crazily in the wind, accompanying it, that savage monster's angry roar below his feet, far surpassing him, like a mountain pressing down, the volume of it, incomparable to any in the world. Only within this short moment of time, in the 3 masters' eyes, they could already tell this savage monster was bathed in blood, extremely savage, but the most important thing was that its evil power had increased dramatically. The damage that the pure fire flame by Yun Yilan had long disappeared and instead seemed to be better. And right now when the black clouds dispersed, indistinctly it could be seen behind this evil monster, within the dark clouds, the piles of beasts' corpses were all like withered leaves, lay exhausted onto the ground. The enormous figure bared its fangs and brandished its claws, covering the entire sky. The dark shadow instantly enveloped the 3 masters. Reverend Daoshuan's face was solemn, was about to make a move when suddenly Puhong Master quietly said, "Both fellow brothers, please step back slightly." After speaking, Puhong Master moved forward 2 steps, facing that colossal shadow which was pouncing down from the sky. Looking from afar, Puhong Master looked as tiny as an ant. A golden light, released suddenly from his hands, in this sky full of vicious currents and dark clouds, dazzling like a spot of resplendent sun. That enlightened eminent monk, revealing a look of benevolence, clasping both of his palms together, yet from the tip of his fingers, golden light abruptly released, growing in size, instantly resplendent, shooting out thousands of golden light, charging straight to the clouds. In the golden lights, a circular golden wheel magical weapon slowly was offered up. The golden light dazzling, the entire object was golden yellow, a diameter of 1 kai, golden arhat bodies images engraved along the outer ring, surrounding a Buddha in the middle holding a single palm upright, a real body of Buddha image benevolently delivering all from torment. Far away, numerous people almost at the same time, cried out. The Great Compassion Golden Wheel. The treasure of Buddhist sect had just appeared. The golden light immediately was beyond resplendent. With just Puhong Master's power, this golden light was no way inferior to that light screen made by hundreds of disciples. In the golden light, various Buddhist incantations indistinctly appeared. Where it shone, dignified, solemn and merciful energy filled the air, contrasting obviously against that vicious currents ahead of it. Just that, although facing this treasure which had not appeared for generations, that savage beast which leapt out deep from the dark clouds, full of murderous intention, under the beast deity's manipulation, did not show any slightest sign of retreat, continued to descend, leapt down with a crash and headed into the golden light. Surprisingly, when that huge shadow and the resplendent golden light collided, there wasn't a slightest sound, not a catastrophic scene as one expected. The golden light suddenly turned around, surrounding from all directions, and the black gas which originally filled the sky suddenly shrank but still flying forward, until the end, that savage huge body was compressed to less than 1/10 or 2/10 of its original size. However, the remnant of the black gas turned darker, the vicious currents increased incessantly, in the indistinct roars and howls, this black arrow streaked across the sky, broke through the golden layers of defense, to Puhong Master. The unearthly cold air, savage face, like the deepest darkness before his eyes. Puhong Master closed his eyes and clasped his palms together, softly chanted incantations, light yet fast, like a song and yet not, like words but yet not. That wheel slowly rotated in the air, emitting thousands of golden light rays, dropped down and landed before Puhong, the Buddha figure and various arhats images, together facing this ancient cruel evil object. In the golden light, their faces were like benevolence, like austere, benevolence to have compassion for the world's living things, austere in order to vanquish the devil massacre viciously, who would know which face is the real face of Buddha. The soft chants, turning louder, in a blink reverberated between heaven and earth. The brilliant golden light burst forth, unable to view it with the naked eye, like a Buddhist fire burning ablaze the sky, swallowing the whole of the darkness before it. A huge golden halo appeared in the mid-air. Such a majestic scene, it was really a rare sight. The crowd on Yunhai were utterly shocked, felt awe at the unparalleled Buddha great powers. Then, while everyone was in awe, that black color which was intimidated by the unparalleled great power of Buddha, suddenly tenaciously flashed out from the golden light, in the resplendency, like a thin black needle, pierced onto the great compassion golden wheel. On the treasured wheel, the compassionate Buddha's face in that instant, flashed past a black color. Almost at the same time, the dignified incantations suddenly paused, the noise and excitement also strangely quietened down. Everyone's gazes, immediately focused on that two figures in the golden light. On Puhong Master's face, a trace of pain flashed past and that black gas-like being revived again, swiftly grew larger and gradually took form, revealing the beast deity's figure. The black gas gradually rose, the good faction people together turned pale. Looking from afar, the beast deity's face did not show any expression, even his eyes remained cold. Right now on the golden wheel, the Buddha's face started to show an unusual black, turning darker and darker. The original compassionate appearance also turned cruel, becoming more and more savage. Puhong Master's expression changed greatly, his face turned dark, with a low roar, his monk robes rose without wind, his figure in that instant grew. As if being agitated, the golden light in the sky suddenly spinned, making light sharp sounds, rapidly returned to Puhong Master and condensed into a golden light ball, as big as a human palm. Golden rays scurried around, like the daylight. Even from afar one could feel the Buddhist power surging within it. In the sky, the solemn incantations again started. The golden light ball shone with brilliant light, slowly moved forward, under this dignified solemn Buddhist power urging. The black stain on the golden wheel Buddha's face slowly receded, started to resume its original appearance. And the beast deity seemed to sense something, his expression changed slightly. The golden light ball finally met with the great compassionate golden wheel. Out of a sudden, golden light shot inwards, the entire magical weapon golden wheel seemed to turn transparent, like the morning rays finally being released. The Buddha power as if flowing, like a volcano waiting to erupt, shone with numerous golden dazzling light. The Buddhist incantations shot forth. In that instant, the entire sky seemed to turn into a golden sea. The golden lights gushed over the whole sky, no other color could be seen. In this resplendent dazzling sea of light, it seemed there could be no evil beast that could survive. Other than that indistinct finger. In the world enveloped in Buddhist light, in the recesses of the golden light, there seemed to be a thread of black gas, faint like smoke, lightly drifted up, at times concealed at times obvious. It seemed to be there but seemed like not, spiraling before the golden wheel, lightly on the Buddha's face, between the brows on that compassionate kind face, slightly touched it. That touch, like a grain in the great sea, like a mustard seed in the Mount Zumi, compared to the sky full of Buddhist light, it was so insignificant. But Puhong Master's face changed. In that flash his face darkened, like dead ash. And so, everyone saw in that resplendent light, suddenly heaven and earth quaked, the golden lights in a turbulent. The monk who looked like a celestial, with a "wah" sound, spat out a mouthful of blood, dyed the golden wheel in front of it red. The violent winds slowly died down, the chaotic sky also turned quiet, the golden light flickered and faded and slowly disappeared. Puhong Master's lips trembled, his body also staggered back. Fa Xiong and the rest behind him immediately dashed up, caught him. Puhong Master gave a bitter laugh, looked at that void in front of him, clasped his palms together. Patron's skills are really powerful, it is really something this old monk has not seen before. Admirable, admirable. On Qing Yunhil Tong Tian Peak, the numerous good faction disciples were dumbfounded. In the midair, the golden lights dispersed, the black air revived once again, like leaping out from the empty air, a sharp whistle. That gigantic ferocious evil beast reappeared again, made one wondered such a huge body, in that intense fight just now, why did they not see it and now it just reborn again like that? And above its head, that figure which under the horizon, not one of the good faction did not cast their glances in fear towards him. His face was paler, for the first time his cold face had an indistinct tiredness, only his eyes remained cold. However, when his eyes landed on Puhong Master, his expression eventually slightly changed, coldly snorted. The Central Plains cultivated skills are really out of the ordinary. Puhong Master nodded slightly. He actually intended to say a few words to persuade him, but looking at his expression, he knew it would be in vain, and so under Fa Shang and the others' support, backed down. Among the three leaders, two had already lost to this mysterious evil person. The crowd at Tong Tien Peak changed countenance. And over at Beast Deity side, 10,000s of beasts held together, their morales high. And at this moment, a sound of roar, from behind the crowd, in Tong Tien Peak Crystal Hall, in the cold icy pool, an enormous whirlpool suddenly appeared. The pool rapidly spinned, turning faster and faster. That tiger roar like dragons singing became louder and louder, and actually suppressed those innumerable demonic beasts' cries down. And in the icy cold pool, the water column, as if being stimulated, suddenly rose. As straight as a brush it flew up to the sky, until several jongs high. The water column did not scatter, like a wild flower burst forth. Qing Yunhil Celestial Beast Guardian Water Kirin's colossal body emerged. The disciples on Tong Tien Peak were first shocked, following which wild cheers of joy were heard, their morales boosted greatly. The water Kirin, before everyone's stares, raised his head and held long to the sky, shook its head and tail, leaving the water column, and flew forward, landed among the clouds. The water column then dropped down with a crash. A loud rumble like a mountain torrent splattered the surrounding icy pool wet and cold. The good faction disciples who couldn't escape in time looked quite a sorry state. But most of the people couldn't care much, their gazes were all looking up to the sky. The water Kirin glared angrily with its wide eyes, roaring ceaselessly, hovering in the mid-air, and a dark green figure slowly landed onto the water Kirin, facing the front, that beast deity which seemed invincible. Reverend Dao Zan. The beast deity's detached expression did not change, met Reverend Dao Xuan's stare across the air. And that huge ferocious evil monster below his feet facing the water Kirin, at the same time roared with the same ferocity back, and the water Kirin facing such monster, evidently did not have any slightest good feeling, looked even more ferocious, bared its fangs and roared back. In the roar, the water Kirin suddenly lifted its head, faint dark green light flashed past, spat out a long sword which looked like stone, hovered in the sky. Reverend Dao Zan stretched out his right hand and caught it. In that instant, suddenly, the entire Qing Yun Hill was silent, and the next moment, a deafening roar like a torrent burst forth. Zhu Xian Ancient Sword. The legendary, considered unexcelled in the world, an all-conquering Zhu Xian Ancient Sword, the good faction supreme celestial weapon to subdue demon and vanquish evil, finally after 10 years, again appeared in the mortal world. A beam of light, from that legendary ancient sword, like gentle water quietly flowing, traveled to Reverend Dao Xuan's body. In the countless cheers, the moment Reverend Dao Zan held the sword handle, for some reason, his body trembled slightly. Then, he again exert force, steadily, heavily, held Zhu Xian Ancient Sword in his hand. Heaven bestowed celestial sword, to vanquish evil. Reverend Dao Zan did not look different, his expression calm, his hand holding Zhu Xian, pointing at the beast deity. In the people's eyes, he was like a celestial which could not be profane. Under the sword, countless cheered. And before the sword, the beast deity looked at that ancient sword for a long time, and then intently at Reverend Dao Zan. Suddenly a change appeared on his cold face. He actually shook his head and laughed. His laughter, loud and bright, reverberated between heaven and earth, in it mixed with a few sounds of low coughs. Good sword, good sword. Beast deity actually clapped his hands and praised. However, in his words, there were subtle mocking intentions. Said, with this supreme savage sword, even I have some reservations. Unexpectedly it is in your hands, it is really, ha 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 ha. He did not continue, and like he was looking at something most ridiculous in his life for the first time, he couldn't hold back and laugh out loud, confounding the rest of the people. Facing that savage person, Reverend Dao Xuan's expression did not change, and did not refute, only breathed deeply, briefly closed his eyes and opened, his eyes glinting. Instantly, a brilliant light from Zhu Xian Ancient Sword, released out. The water Kirin held to the sky. The beast deity suddenly stopped laughing, his face revealed seriousness, facing ahead. And all of the people below held their breaths. Everyone knew, the fight between these two was already the final battle. The final ending of this catastrophe is finally here.